Call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we get started on the roll call, I'd like to thank our interpreter team for being here with us this morning from All Languages Translation Services. If I could go ahead and invite them up to the microphone to make a brief announcement.
Good morning. Para aquellas personas que quieran escuchar esta junta en español, tenemos audífonos en la mesa de atrás. Pueden pasar por uno. Vamos a tener interpretación simultánea al español. Gracias. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to all of our members here on the dais, for the recording purposes, it is important. I know we're having a little bit of challenges with the microphones this morning, but it is important to speak directly into the microphone so that we can capture that audio for the recording, as this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our city's website tomorrow. For roll call, Councilmember Campos.
Present.
Councilmember Halter is absent. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember McReynolds.
Here.
Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sanchez Palacios.
Here.
And Mayor Schrader.
Here.
6 members are present, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's go to the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Deputy Mayor, would you like to take us through this?
You'll join me. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
So closed session report, Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no reportable action.
Formal items, we're going to take public comments before we get started. I want to thank CAPS Media. This is our first time we've done goal setting in person in 3 years, I think. So thank you for all the help. So we'll go to public comments. Mr. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have 9 public speaker cards. A reminder to our participants, the speaker cards are located at the registration table if you'd like to sign up for public comment. Speakers will have 3 minutes. Our first speaker is Karen Flock, followed by Barbara Brown.
Good morning. My name is Karen Flock. I think we have a real opportunity this year to make progress on housing and homeless issues. So please take that into consideration as you do your great work this morning.
Our next speaker is Barbara Brown, followed by Kent Bullard.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to be here today to share with you our feelings about what's important for Ventura. My name is Barbara Brown, and I am the co-founder of the Ventura Tree Alliance, and I'm here to advocate for trees. As you know, trees are a climate change solution, and as the days get hotter and hotter, it becomes more important to add trees to our tree canopy. I do want to take a moment and thank the City of Ventura's tree urban forestry team. They have been a huge help. We have been able to plant almost 120 trees in the City of Ventura in the last 18 months. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kent Bullard, followed by Wayne Morgan.
Good morning. My name is Kent Bullard. I've been a resident of the city here for, I don't know, my 5th decade now. And what I'd like to advocate for is the city has a requirement under Senate Bill 379 to implement a expedited solar approval program. And there were 2 options, one of which was to adopt a Sandia laboratory developed program, Solar APP Plus, which is for solar expedited permit program plus batteries. And the city opted to not follow that program, but take the alternate and check the box that did not include that, which did not enable them to apply for a grant that's available for a city of our size. $80,000 is available to implement Solar App Plus, and I think that needs to be done. Also, I'd like to advocate for the city to continue its advanced drive electric program with the city fleet, as well as chargers available. And where we're really finding that chargers are needed are in the low-income disadvantaged communities and areas with multifamily units. 80% of the cars on the road right now are charging at home. So those are the cars that are taking care of themselves. It's nice to see a new Tesla supercharger station being built right now at Denny's at Ashwood. But we really need stuff on the east side where there's a lot of people there that have renters or do not have access to an outlet. We need public access charging in those areas to increase the adoption of EVs here in the county and the city, of course.
Our next speaker is Wayne Morgan, followed by Laura Kinney.
Hello, council members. My name is Wayne Morgan. I'm a retired electrical engineer, and I live in Ventura. One goal of the CARP is to get rid of greenhouse emissions back to 40% of the 1990 levels. Decisions that the council makes should have the reduction of greenhouse gases top of mind. The two largest segments that contribute to the city's greenhouse gas emissions are transportation at 52% and buildings at 21%. For transportation, the city should move to EVs wherever possible. The maintenance costs and electric fuel costs, in many cases, make EVs a better choice. Just don't look at the initial cost. Chargers should be a priority at public locations, and businesses should be encouraged to have chargers for on-site workers to charge their cars during the day. Fast EV chargers should be in place in communities where home charging may not be available. For buildings, new construction should be free of non-renewable energy. The California Building Code now requires electrical wiring to be available to accommodate electrical systems in place of natural gas systems. It makes no sense to me to add the expense of adding gas infrastructure to new construction, especially when we're talking about retrofits in the near future. I want to see an ordinance that codifies this because it takes less time than a REACH code would. More than 50 cities in California have already done this. One really good example is Ithaca, New York, which has officially approved a plan to see all of the buildings in their city, private and public, be made or be electrified by 2030. Time is crucial. The IPCC is running out of superlatives to convey the urgency to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We are running out of time. On Earth Day, local students marched to the City Hall to attend a city council meeting and encouraged council members to move forward with developing a CARP. That was in 2017. That was 6 years ago.
Okay, so if I reference it, he can.
There are resources and money out there that can help with the decarbonizing of the city. Please look to these resources and contact me if you want to get more information or presentations. I'd be happy to do that, and I would be happy to get other resources available to you. Thank you.
Laura Kinney, followed by Kathleen Wheeler.
Good morning. My name is Laura Kinney. I'm a 30-year Ventura resident, and I'm a short-term vacation rental owner and manager. Nice to see people sitting around the table that I voted for, so I appreciate it. I want to talk about the current ordinance that we have and prospective revisions. I believe our current ordinance is actually pretty good. I think it needs to be enhanced, improved, expanded to some degree. I don't think it needs to be thrown out and start over. I know there's a big concern, and understandably so, of the number of short-term rentals and where they're located. I think that's an issue we should definitely address. I also think it's a very complicated issue with lots of maybe unintended consequences, so it needs to be studied thoroughly, but I personally agree with that concept. But in addition to that, I also think there are elements of the current law that could be strengthened, clarified. There's some parts of the ordinance that are very confusing and difficult to follow. I think a huge issue is enforcement. And unless we have enforcement, no matter what we do with the ordinance, it's not going to matter. So I'm just making a plug for, yes, let's revise the ordinance. Let's do it in a robust, balanced way, soliciting input from many different parties, and try to come up with a good compromise that works for everybody. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kathleen Wheeler, followed by Judy Hauer.
morning. Good morning. Hopefully, as new information becomes available, we learn from it, and we're able to change course when it makes sense to do so, when we see that our current direction isn't working. Hopefully, we can manage not to indulge for too long in our understandable but nevertheless ultimately unproductive denial. Hopefully, we can do that as individuals, as organizations, and as a city government. As the current state of science and scientific research around the ill effects of gas in our homes becomes clear, it breaks my heart to see this become yet another divisive issue. The precise magnitude and manifestation of the ill effects, it's true, is subject to some uncertainty. Is it 13%? Is it 20% of kids who get asthma from gas stoves? And just as the tobacco industry and gas and oil have done, it's at this precise point in a scientific investigation that the disinformation campaigns are launched. Uncertainty about the magnitude gets reframed as uncertainty about whether there is an effect, and this is even as the consensus is growing that there clearly is. I believe that we all arrive at our resistance legitimately. There are real reasons that we resist, whether it's my own or yours, and I strive to understand because I may be changed by listening, and you may be changed if I hear a missing piece of information on your part that I could help with. But the sources of resistance that I've been able to glean on your part to building electrification are at best disappointing and at worst stunning. Only 10% of cities are doing this. A builder can already choose to go for electric or gas, so let's leave it to the builders. All you need to do is vent properly. The CARP is coming. We can decide then how aggressive we want to be, so let's wait. Deferring is denial of the seriousness of climate change, denial of the effects on children of gas stoves, and especially denial of the disparate impact of gas appliances in homes on disadvantaged communities. Last year, you chose equity as your most important filter for deciding whether to act on new opportunities. So please don't wait to act on this quick and immediate and low-hanging fruit way to act on climate change. The greatest threat to our planet is believing that somebody else is going to save it.
Our next speaker is Judy Hauer, followed by Mike Muller.
Thank you for being here Saturday morning. My concerns have to do with obvious changes that are taking place right now. In particular, you can look at Surfers Point to see the damage of seawater intrusion. If you don't feel climate change is happening, just take a walk on the promenade and realize that we keep rebuilding that area over and over. That's pretty much insanity to do the same thing and expect different results. The last speaker gave you a great example of something we can do. We can make it safer for our population by making changes that really make sense right now. We have obvious evidence that we need to make these changes, and you have that opportunity. Another really important part of our honoring what the climate is doing is trying to do more for water retention. We had an unfortunate situation here with Lake Casitas not even being able to retain the water that was graciously coming down. We need to think about retaining it in our own city as well. So I appreciate your being here on a Saturday. I appreciate your thinking about it. And the living example right now is we've got to make the change. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mike Muller, followed by Jan Dietrich.
Hi guys, thank you. My name's Mike. I live over here off the avenue. Just getting kind of worried. Well, every day I have to worry, like whenever my wife has to go to the supermarket, there's kind of vagrants, like swinging tree branches and stuff. I'm kind of worried just for the overall safety of the community on the west side. I know it's bad everywhere, but that's kind of one of my main concerns. Obviously, global warming is important, but just day-to-day safety in our town, I think, should be thought about. I don't know if the rain made it worse. Everyone that lived in the riverbed came out, but it's kind of violent and it's kind of scary around town. So I just wanted to say that should maybe be a priority. Thank you.
Jan Dietrich, followed by Mike McBain.
Good morning. I'm speaking first for my company, Rincon Vitova Insectaries, that's just in the just outside the city limits, but we use the Ventura water and we're in the sphere of influence. And on that, wearing that hat, I want to tell you that my colleague and co-owner of our business has spent the last 18 months on a state committee called the Sustainable Pest Management Work Group that has just released on Wednesday a Sustainable Pest Management Roadmap for the state. And I brought 2 copies of the executive summary so that you can get a preview. And the whole roadmap is on the website. We would like to offer our help in any way to make sure that the city is in alignment with the Sustainable Pest Management Roadmap. I am the policy team leader for 350 Ventura County Climate Hub. I've been coming to this city and other cities in the county for the last 12 years talking about climate change and endorse the things that have been said previously. Of course, we need safety and all of that too, but climate needs stronger action. I was with 100 youth talking to Mayor Eric Nazarenko about this. I have been with youth talking with Christy Weir and other prior council members about building electrification. Very specifically, it is, as Kathleen said, heartbreaking to see these buildings keep going up and studies keep coming out saying how unhealthy these brand new buildings are for young people. I don't know what the ventilation they're putting in them, but why? Why, when Edison wants you to do this, to stop putting gas connections in new buildings? This is a basic, fundamental climate action no-brainer. So I've been tracking climate action plans all over the state. Almost none of them achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions. They have to go back to the drawing board. Plans are good, but action is what we must have now. The county has this plan. 5 years we watched them put it together. And 2 years since it was adopted, and almost none of the programs have been implemented yet. This mindset of what I agree is some kind of policy denial. Well, we've got to put climate much more front and center in the goals for this year. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, our next speaker is Mike McBain. And just a reminder to our attendees, if you'd like to provide public comment, we are nearing the end of the public comment period. There are speaker cards at our registration table. Please feel free to complete one of those speaker cards and we can add you to the list. So again, speaker cards at the registration table. Mike McBain, and Mike will be followed by our final speaker, Terrence Foley.
Mike McBain. I've lived at 432 Lynbrook Avenue in Ventura since 1987. And I tried to get some street repairs done on my street and Crestwood between Loma Vista and Foothill. And I was told that the department that takes care of the street repairs doesn't have the resources to do their job in a responsible way. So they gave me an idea that my street repair would be done a year to 2 years from now, which should have been done yesterday because I drive up my street every day and the patchwork that was done 2 or 3 years ago just didn't work it fell apart quickly and really needs a lot of work. But this is true of a lot of other places in Ventura. I spent 11 months asking for my office building street, Thiel, to be repaired. And finally, after 11 months, it was done. And it vastly improved Thiel right within 20 yards of Victoria, which is surprising to me that we would let our infrastructure go unattended for as long as we have. That's it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Terrence Foley, followed by our final speaker, Don Wood.
Morning, everybody. I'm Terry Foley, speaking on behalf of the Pierpont Bay Community Council. And just briefly, we live in Ventura, in the city here, where the average person cannot afford the average house, and the average renter cannot afford, if he went out today and looked for a place, could not afford a place to live without spending over half their income. So Pierpont Bay Community Council wants to encourage the City Council to pursue all the goals that have to do with housing and making housing affordable for other people, including the short-term vacation rental ordinance, which we heard from Laura Kenny. If you look and you say, well, here's what Terry's saying, here's what Laura's saying, and representing everybody across the spectrum, there's no reason not to pursue this as a simple goal. Since all the work's already been done, as far as every other community on the coast of California has done things to improve their short-term rental ordinances, it's just a matter of getting together and making sure that those things get incorporated into the ordinance that Ventura has. So in the last 12 years, for the first 5, I wasn't involved, but for the last 7, I've been involved. And it's just a matter of just saying, well, it's time to get something done. Let's do that. Thank you very much.
And our final speaker is Don Wood.
Morning, folks. Thanks for your time. Here as a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission, but really as a resident, property owner, father, and grandfather of 2 young children who live in the city. And I would just like to implore the city to recognize the value that our parks and recreation programs provide to our city and make it a priority, make it a strong priority when we look at our vision and we look at the spending, especially of our capital improvement programs. We have some really terrific parks and robust recreation programs in the city, and they provide a high quality of value. But we do have some properties that are in disrepair. Look at Camino Real and some of the facilities there. Really require investment, and their investment that we need this organization to allocate. So I'd like, again, consider the quality of life that our Parks and Recreation provide to the city and make it a strong priority in the future of our city planning. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, that concludes our public comment.
Thank you much. Andy, Andy Fox is going to be our facilitator.
Yeah.
Akbar, do you want to do an introduction?
So, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, so for those of you that hadn't had an opportunity to meet, my name is Andy Fox. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks, and I held office in Thousand Oaks for 24 years, mayor and council member in Thousand Oaks. Recently, I did some work with my partner, Diane McKay, on the fire services strategic plan, so I had an opportunity to get to know Ventura a little bit better, other than my family visits to the beach here. In my other life, I was a firefighter for the city of Los Angeles for 38 years and had a variety of positions with LA City, including the second in command, the deputy chief of the department. So very pleased to be here with you today on a very important, arguably maybe the most important council meeting you'll have during this year, or maybe even your terms, depending on how often you set goals. And that is setting a course for the city for the next several years, in some cases, on establishing goals and priorities for your community. I've had an opportunity to meet individually with all the council members in some form or fashion to get a little bit of a sense of their expectations for today. And so we look forward to a robust discussion. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And hopefully we'll come out with a list of focused goals that the council can refer to during the course of this next year and even their term that will provide an improved level of service to the community. That's what we're all about. So first, I wanted to just, I sent out to the council a document on ground rules. And so you have that up there for the community to see. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I'm trusting the council read through it. But today's meeting is going to be a little bit different than your normal everyday council meeting. We're going to actually encourage you to have dialogue with one another. And dialogue is different than discussion. Discussion is what you have around the coffee machine on items of the day, so to speak, current events. It's also not debate. And sometimes even friendly debate. At a council meeting, you'll have a particular issue, and when it comes time for the mayor to call for discussion, then council usually kind of individually states their views on whatever matter happens to be in front of them, and then you go down the line, each council member comments, and then you vote. And then whoever has the most votes, either the item passes or doesn't pass, and then you move on to your next item. We're going to do something a little bit different today, or at least we're going to attempt it. We're going to try to encourage dialogue. So what we're after today is actually discussion, dialogue between council members. And that goes to some of the ground rules that I sent you. Today we're going to ask you to be active listeners. So not focusing necessarily on your own perspective, but to listen to the perspective of your colleagues. And ask questions. Seek a position of curiosity as you have this dialogue. Try to gain some understanding from each other on why it is that these priorities that we're going to talk about in a little bit are important to the community. So that's what we're going to try to do. My job is to keep you in dialogue and kind of divert us from debate. And so asking questions, seeking understanding, active listening, kind of staying engaged. It's labor intensive. You'll be tired at the end of the day if you're able to successfully execute this. But I think for a goal setting session, there should, if we can, there should be no voting. And I talked to most of you about this. Today we're going to attempt to work by consensus. And what consensus actually is all of you basically can buy into the notion or buy into the idea that we're going to talk about with respect to the goals. Now, how do you reach consensus? Sounds kind of corny, but we're going to use the old thumbs up method. The old thumbs up method. So if you can, in a sense, live with the goals that we're going to work our way through, put your thumb up. If you can't live with it, then you're going to put your thumb down. If you kind of are halfway there, your thumb will be in the middle. Now, what exactly does a thumb up mean? As a general rule, you're 70% there. So, for example, if Councilmember Johnson has an idea that's his idea, he feels very strongly about, you'll get into dialogue, you'll get into some discussion about that, you'll have a firm understanding on it. It goes without saying that the individual council member would probably be 100% for that idea. Councilmember Campos, though, while she likes the idea, she's not 100%, but she's 70%. It's okay to put your thumb in the air for that. 70%, I can live with that. If you're 50%, you're not there, so you're like there. And if you actually hate the idea, then you're going to be a thumbs down. So we're going to give that a shot. Here's the good news for that. When you work with consensus, there are no losers. There's no winning and losing. There's no, I got more votes than you. Is there dialogue? Yes. But if your thumb's in the air, then by definition, you're owning that decision. And so when we're done, even if we come out with a small list of goals, all of you can feel good because you had a hand in it. Your thumb was in the air. You didn't get voted out. You didn't get voted down. And when we walk out that door, all of you can be, while you might have been 70% on the individual item, you're 100% behind the goals. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Okay. The one thing about consensus, though, it's labor intensive, and we don't have all day because you're going to have discussions, you're going to have dialogue. We have a limited amount of time. If for some reason, and I'm going to try to kind of, without rushing you, work our way through because you have a lot of items on the desk here, so to speak. If for some reason we're unable to do that, then we're going to default to the good old fashioned, we'll put the goals up, you can put your yellow, blue, red sticky on there, and then the number of the ones that has the most dots wins the day. And if that doesn't work, we'll revert to good old rock, paper, scissors. Okay? But one way or another, we're going to come out with a set of goals for the city of Ventura, and hopefully we're going to get through this consensus process. And for some of you, it might be something new, but I think if we're able to execute it, you're going to find that this is really a much better way for public policy decisions to be made. You would not be able to do this in a regular council meeting for a whole bunch of reasons, but you certainly can do it for goal setting. So any questions on the ground rules? Like I said, we have them up there. Basically, transparency. This is the time to have a good open discussion. I mentioned curiosity, ask questions. If Councilmember McReynolds has an idea and you're not quite sure where he's coming from, today's the day to ask the question. You don't get one and done, okay? You just throw your hand in the air or let me know, and let's have some dialogue. Talk to one another, okay? One of the offshoots of this, and I recognize 3 of you are new to the council, all of you are relatively new. An indirect benefit of this is going to build cohesion. It's going to build cohesion, it's going to build a team. In a sense, you're all board of directors for the city of Ventura, and this is going to build cohesion. So there's a lot of indirect benefits of this process. Accountability, we're all going to take accountability for following our process, and then some compassion. If you really have some strong feelings towards one thing or another, maybe step back, for whatever reason that item that's on the table is important to one of your colleagues, one or more of your colleagues. So we're going to do our best to show some compassion and some understanding, even if we disagree. All right, any questions on the ground rules? I know it was a multi-page document, by the way, but I think that'll serve our purposes today. Any questions on the consensus process? Okay. What we are going to reference once, here's what I'd ask you to do. I think we're going to come back and visit this a couple times. You notice we have the SMART goals up there. I don't know if we can bring the SMART goals up so everybody in the back can see them. We're going to do our best to overlay the goals that we arrive at with SMART goals, kind of old-fashioned. And so just as a review, it's specific. So it's not so general that we really don't know what we're talking about. It's measurable. And so what we mean by measurable is, can we actually develop benchmarks to determine we're actually working our way and actually accomplishing the goal? Is it achievable? It's important. It has to be achievable, feasible, whatever you want to do. If the idea is we're going to do something that is really not feasible, we're not going to move the Pacific Ocean. It's not achievable, not feasible. Okay, so even though that might be a goal, we're not going to be able to do that. All right, so it has to be achievable. Is it relevant? Is it relevant to the city of Ventura? And we have some tools to look at that. One of that is your citizens' attitude survey. So that's a good measurement. It's not the only measurement, but it's a good measurement to see, is this relevant to where the community is at? You are 7, you've all been elected. Your personal perspective, relevant too. Voters of Ventura put you in here, and so your perspective is another good test for relevance. And then the third one, or the last one, is time bound. So can you put a time, some kind of time goal around that? And on that note, I want to just share a perspective. Over the years, I had an opportunity to sit on a lot of boards and committees outside the city of Thousand Oaks. I was on the board of directors for League of Cities and on SCAG, and I got an opportunity over the years to interact with a lot of council members from basically all over California. And one thing that I observed, both here in Ventura County and across the state, is first-time council members have a great deal of energy in wanting to accomplish something right away. They ran for office because they wanted to make a difference, and they're very, very motivated to accomplish things right away. And what I want to just suggest to all of you is, all of you were elected to a 4-year term, minimum. If you're going to run for re-election, you're going to be around for maybe 8 years or longer. I'm not sure what your term limits are. But I would ask you, in terms of time bound, think of things in terms of what you want to accomplish, not just this year, it's important, but over the 4-year perspective. Because some of the goals that you have are actually multi-year goals. So having that perspective, I think, will kind of, in a sense, maybe calm down this sense of, I got to get something done because I want to be responsive to my constituents. You have 4 years. And contrary to what some may tell you, I'm here to tell you, and I can speak with a fair amount of expertise, the 4 years does not go by fast. It does not. You will have plenty of time to accomplish what you want to do individually and collectively as a council in that 4-year period. So time is not a pressure issue. So we're going to apply these SMART goals as you do them, as you work through it. I want you to apply them within your own kind of process. And then as a group, once we develop where our goals are going to be, we're going to come back and we're going to apply, is that a SMART goal? Just to make sure that we're kind of on the same page. Any questions on that? Okay. Akbar, did you want to kind of do a quick review of kind of a summary or where we're at and kind of maybe some of the review from the last council meeting?
Sure thing. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate you kicking that off. I'm going to tag along to the mayor's thank yous because I feel some of them are warranted. I also want to thank the Museum of Ventura County for having us on short notice, providing this amazing venue for us to be able to do this offsite. Of course, it takes a lot of work to do something outside of City Hall to make that all happen. So thank you for the team that helped put that together. Michael McDonald and his staff in the clerk's office, Heather Sumagaisai and Courtney Deppin in our office, among many others I'm sure helped. Caps for recording the message. It seems like we got past our audio issues and things are working fine now, so thank you for doing that. Also, the members of the public that are here in the audience this morning, I'm heartened to see pretty much every seat full, and in doing this, I know we've been virtual the last couple of years, but I haven't seen so many people in the audience for a goal setting. That's very encouraging. And then lastly, the council and staff, and for the staff that, if I don't make them work enough Monday through Friday, they're here on their Saturday, so thank you for being here. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you need to use the restroom, the restrooms are across the breezeway. Those are open for our guests to use. We don't have a scheduled break on the agenda, but I'll play it by ear with the mayor to make that call when the time is warranted. I'm first going to go through the visual aids that Andy was referring to just a minute ago. So immediately to Michael's right, the multicolored graph there that you see, or the tables, are the city council's existing goals. They're on 2 different boards to make them just a little bit more legible. I know they're hard to read for anyone in the audience, but this is also on the sheet in front of every city council member. It just is a kind of a graphic summary of all of the city council's existing goals. In the packet that was posted to the city website last week, there is an update, a quarterly update that we provide on all the existing goals that shows where we're at with each one of those. To the left of those 2 boards is the 2 ones that are kind of in the middle there. Those are the key findings from our community attitude survey. This was a statistically valid survey conducted in the spring of 2022, so just about 9 months ago. It was a survey of our residents, of what's important to them. We printed that out and had it available just to remind the council of, hey, this is what your constituents said are areas of focus according to them, and I think that's a helpful data point as you go about your goal setting process today. The next item I'm going to bring up is staff. You'll notice your executive team in the front row, in the first couple rows here, and really they're here for 2 main reasons. The first one is to offer their professional opinion when asked. We heard from members of the public this morning already on some of the things that they would like to see. I imagine that the council will have questions about what we've done to date and what we can do going forward. If they are asked, we have the microphone available for them to come up and provide any input that they can share. The second thing is if there's a background on a specific area, if needed, these are our subject matter experts in a lot of ways. They'll be able to answer those kinds of questions. And if there's anything that we need to research, of course, we can get back to City Council on that. I want to remind the council that we do have strategic plans. Some of these items that the council talks about today may affect some of the strategic plans that are in place. This, again, is only a data point I want the council to consider as they go about their discussion today. We do have strategic plans that are either in the works or have already been adopted. And that's not to say that you can't adopt goals that touch one of those subject matter areas. That's completely within the council's purview. A couple of examples, just to name just a few. The economic development strategy, which just got kicked off earlier this month. If there's a goal that's related to economic development, for example, that's of course something we would need to weave into that economic development strategy. The same thing is true of homelessness, which I know is an area of emphasis for the community and for the council. I think you heard from Supervisor Levere on Monday night about the plan that's being jointly worked on between the city and the county to address homelessness. They're working aggressively on that with a due date of this June or July. And then there's things that are adopted, for example, the fire department strategic plan and the IT strategic plan. If there's goals that touch those two things, of course, we may need to weave those in or pivot or adjust if the council wishes. The last thing I'll mention is the memo to the City Council, which is item D in the attachments in today's packet. This was a memo to the council that I wrote in conjunction with our executive team, really just to lay out what I consider to be some of the foundational elements of how we can go forward as an organization and as a community. To remind the council, there were 3 broad themes to that memo, the first of which was creating a culture of customer service, then rebuilding relationships, and then lastly, investing in our workforce. So the outcome of today, the exercise that you're going to be going through with Mr. Fox here, the outcome of that will be brought back to you on February 13th for adoption by the full council. Our jobs as staff between now and then will be to figure out what the resource needs will be to fulfill some of those things between now and then. So with that, Andy, I'll kick it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Akbar. Councilmember McReynolds.
Could the 4 signs, could we maybe bring them over here so people can see them? I mean, I know we have copies of them ourselves. Is that?
I think we can do that.
And then the smart one, if you could put that next to Mr. McDonald, I could read it even better.
All right, and while they're doing that, if we could bring up the existing council goals on the screen.
That's why I said read it. We have those.
Okay, so I know the council has it in their packet. Hopefully the community can read these. These are already adopted either in prior years or last year of the existing council goals. And so what I wanted to do, since 3 of you are new, and circumstances sometimes change, I wanted to go back and just briefly, and I mean briefly, hopefully, because these have already been adopted, I want council to reaffirm through this consensus process, this is going to kind of get us a little practice here, the existing council goals. If there's some things that you'd like to drop off, then certainly let's have that discussion. And we're going to want to hear from the city staff, because if it's an adopted council goal, then the city's already put some considerable resources into it, some more than others, but council probably needs to have some background that might be helpful before they decide they're going to eliminate, if in fact they want to eliminate one of those goals. All right, so let's kind of work in reverse. Is there anything that's up there that's an existing goal that one of the council members would like to place on the table to possibly eliminate? To possibly eliminate. I'm not going to read them all because that's going to take forever.
I would like an understanding of the broadband. Like, I know we've done this, the SoFi contract, and then I believe it's still 10% on the.
And if I may, just a brief reminder to talk directly into the microphone for the recording purposes. Thank you.
The question was an understanding of the broadband.
And that would be for, in terms of Public Works, you know, where they believe we are today. And,
Okay. Somebody want to handle it?
Sure. We can, if you'd like me, I can bring up our executives to come kind of give an update on where we're at with both of those.
Let's do it.
Okay. If I can get Mitchell Cameron and Peter Shade to perhaps share what the resource required for that going forward might be.
Peter Shady from Public Works. So I think there's two elements with broadband that we're working toward. One is the Sci-Fi agreement, which was executed by the last council. And then the second one is the signal upgrade project, which will create a backbone for city infrastructure. Those are the two elements, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, Mitchell Cameron, Chief Technology Officer for the city. Just to expand upon that a bit, the city did receive a grant from the state for about $470,000 to assist in design and engineering of additional laterals to leveraging the traffic signal project as a backbone. But to your point, Councilmember McRollins, I think we've struggled with identifying the true intent of the broadband goal and what we're trying to accomplish. And staff's taken an approach of attempting to provide options, Sci-Fi being one option. To provide you some context with that, what they've offered to do is to build a fiber network that connects old premises, full fiber to the home citywide. And their concept is to work with additional internet service providers to provide internet on that network. To some of the points that have been heard in the community, they're in the process of working with Public Works to design and engineer that network. We don't have a confirmed date of when they'll pull permits. They've indicated that they'd likely pull permits before the end of this calendar year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on that? Bill, did you get what you needed on that?
Yeah, and kind of just, I don't know if this is, sharing part of the, my general belief is broadband internet is the electricity of the 21st century. I mean, we have to figure out how to wire every house, just like we had to figure out how to get electricity to every house.
Okay. All right. Any other things there that council would want to consider removing from your existing goals? Okay, so here's our first moment of truth. So if we want to maintain our existing goals, let's get a thumbs up. We got, okay, Bill's halfway. We got 6. So here's part of the consensus process. So if you're not a thumbs up, then there's 2 things we ask you to do. First, provide the group the rationale why you're either in the middle or thumbs down. And then secondly, if you're, particularly if you're thumbs down, provide an alternative to the group that may not be exactly there, but it's some alternatives that you're thinking along those ways. And then since we're talking about goals, you can, if you just think, I just don't think that's worthy of a goal, then that's your rationale, okay? So Bill, you're up. Bill was in the middle, by the way, and which goal are you talking about?
Specifically broadband.
Broadband, okay.
So I just feel it's too big of a goal. It's unrefined, it's undefined. Don't know what we're trying to achieve. We just heard staff say they're not quite sure what that goal actually means. I'm not saying it's not something that we have to focus and figure out. I just don't know let's call it, we're supposed to do these within 18 months. That is not an 18-month goal. That is a decades-long, overall arching core mission, type idea that we need to do. So
okay.
I would much rather see something come on board in terms of staffing, in terms of good government, come on, is an achievable goal within the next 12 to 18 months.
All right, is your sense that the city does need to develop a broadband network in town?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not that you don't think it's not a worthy goal, it's just in terms of the time parameters, that's over a long period of time.
You're achievable.
Okay,
I just don't think it's achievable in this timeline that we're talking about.
okay. Is there a way that we could possibly, anybody have any thoughts, by the way, this isn't a solo operation here. Anybody have any thoughts on how we might want to tweak that a little bit to reflect kind of where you're at? So I think Mike and then Joe. If it's okay, can I call you guys by your first names?
Please.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you. One of the possibilities as we look at this would be, we came very close to adopting a broadband master plan, and it was pretty much on the table. We were ready to go, and then Sci-Fi came in, and we decided not to adopt the broadband master plan. That's part of the reason why we never actually adopted the Dig Once policy after talking about it for 8 years or something like that, because that was in the broadband master plan. But, given where we're at with Sci-Fi, and given the need for some clarity, it could be to revisit the broadband master plan. Sci-Fi will be great for a lot of things. It will not solve all the problems, and neither will the signal upgrade. But I think, too, a broadband master plan would give council the opportunity to provide some guidance on the Dig Once policy, for example, if that's something we wanted to pursue.
So if I'm hearing you right, Mike, you're saying that as an alternative would be to develop the broadband master plan as opposed to a targeted goal. Does that meet your interests?
Yes, and just to clarify on that, so that was a document that is at some level of completion.
It was just about finished and ready for adoption, yes.
Okay,
It
very
would
good.
need to be changed, what happened with Sci-Fi came, and, yeah.
Joe?
Yeah, so Bill, so the issue isn't broadband, but the issue is the specificity or the lack of specificity on the goal?
And the length of.
So on the length, my thoughts are, like we have Ventura Water Pure, which is obviously not a one-year project as well. It's not on here. I don't think we should limit these city council goals to only those items that we start at the beginning of the year and finish by the end of the year. In fact, these really are set out to be, most of them 18-month goals, and some of them even longer than that.
Right.
So I'm probably with you that there's specificity would improve this goal. But I don't want to limit the goals to only things that we can accomplish by December.
No, I think let me just clarify, you're not. This is not about, not even 18 months. It's fine if the council wants to, because from the staff's perspective, they're looking for a roadmap. And the reality is government by design works slow so you don't make mistakes. You notice I said that with a straight face? And so do not feel like you're handcuffed in terms of the time-bound issue. But I want to go back to Mike's thing. Oh, Liz, go ahead.
Well, from.
You need to use the mic.
I apologize for the delay. From a perspective of having watched 2 years of the Sci-Fi meetings and knowing that the broadband plan was almost in place, I would agree that it would be good to narrow the goal to accomplishing that broadband master plan. And then we've got the parameters for Sci-Fi to work in.
Okay, let me ask staff, because it doesn't sound like that's a big deviation. Go ahead, Mike.
If I could first.
We can hear you.
My understanding, of course, is that if we do something like this, that staff is going to come back with what a timeline might be, and it wouldn't be necessarily accomplishing everything, every part of it by the end of the year, but at least there would be a timeline and some sort of measurable action. Is that correct?
Let me ask staff. Would a broadband master plan, that's what it's called, right?
Yeah.
Does that work for the broadband under the existing goals, or would we add that? Is there more to this than meets the eye?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more than meets the eye. In the council packet that we In fact, the staff report that we produced last week for last week's quarterly update, we provided 2 more rows that I discussed on Monday night. One was the estimated percent complete, and then the staff resource required to have this move forward. For broadband in particular, we've done a lot of the, I'll say, the heavy lifting in the background to get the project now started with Sci-Fi to kind of run with, which is why you see the staff resource required in green as low. In 2018, I believe, this predates me, so I may need someone who has more background on this. The council direction back then was to pursue an option that was cost neutral, that there wouldn't be any capital outlay on the part of the city to make broadband possible or to expand that network, which is largely informed how we selected Sci-Fi ultimately. If we want to take this on as a master plan, it would just be one of those things on the list. I would like to know from the council, it doesn't need to be today, but at a future date, whether that's part and parcel to the Sci-Fi agreement, meaning that continues its course, or whether they see this as a, hey, pause, and let's revisit this.
I think that's a very good point. I didn't hear that you want to recreate the wheel here. This is really more to address, I think what Mike was trying to come up with was something to address Bill's concern over time-bound and specific. Broadband master plan is obviously going to be more than 18 months, but it's specific because you're going to end up with a master plan when you're done, and it's not to undo the Sci-Fi. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to revisit, are we using first names? Is that what we all
Yeah,
said?
first name,
Okay,
yeah.
so what Joe said is I would like to see that broadband plan get to something where Ventura Water Pier is. So it's like this giant program in the background that's running, but it's not on the goals because it's, so the same thing with the broadband. Let's get it to a point where it's defined, we understand what's going on, it's allocated, it's budgeted, and we're moving forward. My concern about broadband on this list is the staff is going to take this list and they're going to design the budget, right? Behind, that's the whole goal of this is, the budget is the ultimate reflection of our true values in terms of how we're allocating our, resources. I don't know if broadband, in terms of the scope and the size of it, is something that staff can go forward and say, we're going to allocate budget to this on it. So it seems like we need to get that master plan designed, drafted, and
Does the first name thing apply to me too? Because I want to make sure. So, and I appreciate the comment, Bill. Just for clarification, the Water Pier program is on our goals list. It's now over there. In fact, I think it's the one in your packet right after broadband under the retained focus on ongoing projects. It's helpful for us as a management team if acknowledging that this may take a dozen years. That's perfectly okay. I think Andy has mentioned that. But specify where you'd like the city and your management, your leadership team to be at the end of that 18 months. So it kind of gives us a milestone achievement because that's what you and your colleagues are going to be evaluating me and the executive team on in terms of performance. So it's perfectly okay to have those lengthy goals, provided that we have some sort of interim goal that the council would like to see on that front.
So an example would be if you developed, because it sounds like we're kind of coalescing around a broadband master plan as a goal, if council could come, or staff could come back and within that first 18 months, here's where we're at with respect to achieving that master plan. And apparently you've already done a fair amount of work.
We have. From what I'm hearing this morning, it sounds like keep going on the broadband path that we have established, but there's maybe a longer-term strategy that the council would like to see.
Okay. Mike?
And if I could just add, I was not on council, but I was an interested, concerned citizen on this, and I was at a lot of the economic development subcommittee meetings where the broadband master plan was being hashed out, and I think it's a great thing that we have that subcommittee that can work on that.
Okay.
And really work through staff so that we can do things efficiently, and so I really like this idea. Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna tweak the broadband. Thumbs up on yours to develop a broadband master plan. Okay, let me see the thumbs on that. Bill's good. Okay, all right, that's on the big board. Develop a broadband master plan. Well, actually, that's part of our old goals, okay? So we're going to tweak that, okay? That's not how do you want to handle that, Akbar? You want to put it as a new goal?
I would like to, and particularly because while there was work associated with the existing goal, we had done a lot of the heavy lift.
I get it.
What the council's asking for, assuming what makes it onto the big board is what ultimately is adopted, that's going to eat up capacity, that's going to compete with other things. And so I think later on in your program, you're going to revisit these things to see if we have a amount that's realistic.
Okay, so for time, right now, we're going to put it on the big board. That's going to be what, we're going to put that in the parking lot. That's on the big board for a new initiative. We're going to go back and revisit these, okay? So develop broadband master plan. Okay, anything else on the existing goals that council would consider removing? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, so now what I want is I want a thumbs up on the council existing goals. Thumbs up on the council existing goals. All right, we got 7 thumbs up. So the council existing goals, the council as a group is agreed, we're going to continue to work down that way. Yeah, very good, very good. All right, so far so good. Okay, now we're going to, let me just make sure we're on point here. Okay. We're going to move to the new goals, right? We have a lot of work to do here. And so while you guys were having some discussion, I took the liberty, and I'm asking for your input on this. Hopefully, let's take for lack of a better description, the low-hanging fruit to see if we can get some traction going. So the first thing, we're not going to take these in order, by the way, necessarily. First thing I'd like to talk about is homelessness, okay? Why did I pick homelessness? Well, a couple reasons. Number one, you already have a plan that's in place. You're working and leaning forward on homelessness. Number two, that board's out of the way, but if you'll notice the board there in terms of the community attitude survey, number 1 item, and not by a little bit. So council can have a high degree of confidence that if you do something on the homeless front, you're in alignment with what your constituents have told you is an important issue. So here's what I'd like to do. Under homelessness and the new initiatives, okay, you have, I believe, 3 bullet points. I'm not going to read them. Is there any one of those bullet points that you would not want to incorporate into your homelessness plan? Mike.
Certainly, I think it's important to reduce homelessness, but this gets into a thing of how is that measured? We've certainly seen in other cities strategies that have successfully reduced homelessness that were inhumane and cruel, and so I would need some more clarity on that.
Okay, so would it be helpful to visit what's in your existing, Joe, did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with Mike on this, that I think if I've got the numbers right, they're probably in the right direction, that City of Los Angeles spent $2.4 billion on homelessness, and their homelessness population increased. So I think it is really, we need to be careful about how we measure things. So it's not just the population, but it's the number of people that we've helped. And services that we provide. It's as humane as all of us want to be, and I don't think one person's more humane than the other. We can get to a point and almost create incentives for other homeless people to come to Ventura. And I'd like to be able to cure the whole county's problems, but I don't think we have the resources to do that. So I think we have to be particularly careful in how we want to measure success with this goal. And I think it's according to the population, according to the citizens, it's the number 1 issue. Above and beyond everything else that we spend time on. It wasn't even close. I'm looking at that chart. Can somebody, the top number was, Mitchell, what's that say? What is it? on the top one? 26, and the next one is 13?
Jeff, it's the last page
Oh,
of the staff
thanks.
report.
Okay, so while you're looking at that, it may be helpful to visit your current homeless plan. Go ahead, Liz.
Well, I think that we also have to consider very seriously what this word homeless means. There's a lot of ambiguity in speaking of solving the homeless problem. There's public safety issues in a couple of areas of town that are serious, but there's a wide swath of homeless that are nothing to do with that. There's unsheltered people who don't live in the river bottom or live in the streets, that live on couches or on boats or rent hotels while they can and then sleep in corners and alleyways. There's a whole big layer that we need to understand before we can just simply say we're going to address homelessness. The city may need an ad hoc committee of citizens involved to really take on this. And many of our speakers spoke about climate issues. The people who are unhoused, not just in Ventura, but all over California today, all over the United States, are like domestic refugees trying to find a safe place not to suffer the effects of climate change. It's a huge issue, so if we're going to make a goal out of it, we need to very specifically define, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And I think establishing a citizens committee is going to be a key.
All right, a couple things. Do we have something on, if I heard you right, Akbar, you guys already have a homelessness strategy plan or something in place?
We have one in the works. It's not adopted. It's being worked on. Division within our community development department is our housing services division. Leona Rollins is working with the continuum of care at the county. That plan is still about 6 months out.
Okay.
It's just getting started, actually, but they do have an aggressive plan to accomplish that. What I think would be helpful for this discussion, because a lot of the strategies are actually going to be identified in that plan.
Right.
I think it would be helpful for this council to articulate what it is they want to see as a result. Not the nuts and bolts, but when the plan is adopted, what would they like the plan to achieve? Because I think that'll help inform not only our own staff, but the county of, hey, this is what the city of Ventura, the elected officials want to see out of this plan. That would be helpful, because I think the strategies are really what the county and the city are going to be working on over the next 6 months.
Right. And I think you all recognize the homelessness issue is, it's, as you mentioned the word solve, respectfully, no one's solving the homeless issue. You're going to figure out how to manage it. And there's a big difference. Two things. One, as part of that strategy, is there a committee or some kind of vehicle for community input? Because let me just ask that question.
It's a good question. I have not verified. I'm about 98% sure that would be a component, but I don't know if Ms. Zayer has any comments along those lines that she can verify or not.
Thank you, Netta Zayer, Acting Community Development Director. There'll be a couple. So the homelessness plan will be discussed at the HOPE Committee, which is a subcommittee of City Council, as well as the Planning Commission. So the plan will go to Planning Commission for a recommendation to City Council, who will ultimately adopt that plan.
Okay. I don't have the board. Is the homelessness plan part of your past goals? Complete homeless plan?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, put that in your mind, because that might be specific, measurable, something that can get accomplished in the next 18 months. And within that plan, there's going to be a variety of things that you can add to. Okay? Go ahead, and then I'll go to Bill.
Sorry to interject, it actually is. One of the goals you identified last year was under housing policies to implement the objectives of the housing element. It's actually an objective of the housing element.
Okay. Very good. Bill.
I would just ask that part of this, a bullet point would be how all of this relates to the Boise decision from the Supreme Court, so that we can understand, how we're moving our homeless goals to meeting the requirements of the Boise decision.
Okay. So that's a legal issue that would likely be incorporated into your housing policy or whatever it may be. City attorney, yeah. We good on that? Okay, not an attorney, okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. You know, I'm glad to hear that we have a plan coming up. I think it's important, you know, whether you're talking about the housing element where these programs are, or this plan, that that those things go through the council subcommittees and are available for public input during the process. And so I have to agree with Councilmember Campos about perhaps a citizen committee. And you know, and what we're talking about here is not necessarily the end result, but perhaps looking at a different process to get where we need to go on this. I will say that I didn't list this in the goals, but I am uncomfortable with laying this all in the hands of the Planning Commission. I know I'm very happy with my Planning Commissioner, but to ask our Planning Commissioners to also be really the body that deals with homelessness is a profound difference in what the Planning Commission does. And I'm concerned too about how much we're asking of them.
Okay. Was the development of the housing plan, did that get vetted through council? Or is that still a work in progress and hasn't really been reviewed by the council?
You're referring to the housing element?
No, the homeless issue, right? The homeless plan, was that approved by council and then given to staff, the concepts?
Yeah, Ms. Ayer, if I may ask kind of a follow-up question, the plan that we are embarking on with the county, was that discussed at the HOPE subcommittee at any point?
Yes, it was, and if I may just clarify, the homeless plan will be discussed with the HOPE subcommittee during its development, and then they will also, Leona Rollins and her team will also then take it to Planning Commission for the formal adoption through Planning Commission and City Council. So there will be plenty of opportunities at HOPE to discuss the plan and its development. It has been discussed there. And then the housing element, which identified preparation of the homelessness plan, was went through Planning Commission and City Council for review and adoption.
Okay, so it didn't stop at the Planning Commission?
It did make a stop there on its way to
But it's
City
on its way to
Council.
City Council, okay, all right. I want to keep this thing moving. So under homelessness, you have 3 bullet items. Build a coalition with the county and other Ventura cities to address homelessness. That's what really almost all the cities are doing, because it's not a county issue. It's a city by city issue where your county is a partner along with public safety and a variety of other agencies. Reduce homelessness, I'm going to respectfully, that's a broader issue. So, and the whole idea of your homeless plan would be to reduce homeless, so I'd say that's redundant. And then develop a flow chart of a path forward to house those who are not on the verge of not being housed. Is it fair to say that that's going to be in the plan? That's what I thought. Okay. So, other than reduce homelessness, would it be acceptable to incorporate these 2 bullet points into your broader homelessness plan, which has come into council when?
The update from Supervisor Levere, I believe he referenced June or July for it being complete, and I imagine it would come to council shortly after that.
Okay. And I know we visited this already, but in terms of a council goal, would it be appropriate, and I'm looking at the homeless, would it be appropriate for council to adopt completion of the homelessness plan, or would that be redundant for this year?
Thank you. If the goal is to continue with the goal from last year of implementing the objectives of the housing element, it's already in there. We attached a work plan of what community development's working on and initiatives that are carrying over, so we've identified it there. But if we want to be super clear, yes, please add it on the goals of finishing that out.
Okay. You okay with that?
I think that's a fine approach. I think as Netta mentioned, it's something that's going to be incorporated into another document, but I think having a focused discussion on this
Yeah.
very topic would be
Okay,
helpful.
so the question for the council is, we're looking for a thumbs up here, is, because this is focused, it's time measurable and specific, complete the homelessness plan this year, okay? And that would incorporate these bullet points as well as a variety of other things that council talked about. So you're going to get a homeless plan sometime before the end of the year.
Just a point of order. So when we say complete this year, we're saying June 30, 24.
Well, it's actually January 2023, so that gives them 6 months to be late, because it's coming in June, okay? You guys follow that?
Andy,
Okay,
we're
Jeanette?
Talking the calendar year.
Yeah, right.
And just to clarify, we're taking out reduce homelessness and
Yeah.
just leaving the two.
Yeah, if it's okay with you guys, because that's kind of a catch-all. That's why you're doing the whole plan, right? Okay, so thumbs up on develop and complete a homelessness plan that would incorporate these 2 bullet points that we have on here to come back to the council in June.
And again, we're going to be at the mercy of the timeline of the county as well. So there are going to be elements of the project that are outside of our staff's control. I just want to caution the council.
With a goal of June. How's that?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, we will take time, even when they finish in June, there's probably going to be some comment period. I don't want to set the expectation that we can bring it forward in June.
Okay.
Very likely it'll take several months before we can bring
Calendar
it
year.
forward.
Okay, by the end of the calendar year. Okay, for what you just heard. Okay, everybody understand what that goal is? Okay, I need a thumbs up. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
So just to get clarity, so this is the goal, to get the plan developed. Between now and the plan, though, is there no other goal? Is there nothing? I know we're doing things right now, but is there nothing that we can measure right now between now and the plan being completed?
Go ahead.
Well, I think we should continue to pursue the activities that we're already doing. The council, I think, historically has recognized homelessness as a pressing issue that is deserving of our attention and our resource. And to that end, we've gone a long way in establishing the Housing Services Division and staffing Leona with several folks to help address the issue. There's that piece. The only thing I'd want to caution the council on is not getting too far ahead in something that's going to tie our hands long-term, because I know we want to develop this plan with the county. That's the only caution. In terms of what we can do between now and then, I know Ms. Flock is in the audience. The Housing Authority is working towards another permanent supportive housing site. The city has been, while they are the lead, we are kind of in the support role, and lending our hand and services in any way we can to help support that effort, I think would be a laudable thing for staff to undertake between now and then. That's not the exhaustive list.
I want to remind the council, your goal or your mission here today is to establish goals, not tactics and not strategies in terms of how to do things or when to do things. So, my sense is there's probably some things that are ongoing that are happening right now. I'm getting a nod, yes, on the area of homelessness. So it's not like nobody's doing anything. This is a broad but specific and targeted, coming back to the council in this calendar year for a homeless plan that will incorporate a whole variety of strategies and tactics to address homelessness in the city of Ventura.
I don't think that saying reducing homelessness is redundant, because that's what's measurable. We can measure that when we reduce.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's put it in if you guys are good with that. So the thumbs up would be, again, to complete the homelessness plan that would incorporate those 3 bullet points that are on this list to be brought back to the council by the end of the calendar year. Everybody understand that? Jeanette?
I hear what you're saying. My concern is the measurable. what if we don't reduce it, right? And then it becomes an issue of we didn't meet that goal. And I tend to agree with the overall view that we're adding this as our goal and to reduce homelessness. That is our goal. But I'm not sure about how do we measure it. There's many creative ways to do it, and to me, there's many layers of how to reduce it. So kind of just concerned about keeping that in there.
And I think to Jeanette's point, just a thought is, part of those things that will go to reducing homelessness are in your plan. Let me just give you an example. Recently in Thousand Oaks, they approved, and it's coming basically a temporary housing. They converted an old motel into temporary housing. That's going to take folks off the street. It's real, it's measurable, and it's a specific number. I think it was like 76. So to your point, when that gets put in place, we just reduce homelessness by 76 people. It's easy to measure that. You guys will be able to do the same thing if you, in fact, develop that's one of your strategies and you're able to execute it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, maybe a different word like addressing homelessness might be better or suitable versus reducing.
Okay.
Something to that effect.
Go ahead, Liz.
Well, I agree with Jeanette that we may feel that it's measurable, Jim, but I think that because we have no control of people moving in and out of the city in homelessness, we may pull 1,000 people off the street, and the next day there's 500 more coming in. So it's very difficult to measure a non-static number. But
what would you offer as an alternative, Jim?
Well, we count those that we've housed, put in behavioral health, put into transitional living, we count those. That's reducing homelessness because they're in a program, or now they're in a place where they're not on the street anymore. I think it's a simple count.
All right. Well, let's give this a shot. So, go ahead.
I also want to make sure that we're not, I don't know if I misunderstood an earlier answer from staff, but make sure this is separate from the housing element.
It is. This is not part of the housing. This is homeless. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to give it a shot here. Thumbs up for all three bullets for the homelessness plan to go on the big board, to be brought back to the council this calendar year. Get a thumbs up. Mike's halfway. What do you need, Mike? Oh, and Joe's halfway. All right. What do we need to do to tweak this to get us where we need to go?
So, Mike, because my bet is that we're going to say the same thing. I think, going back on what Jim said, I think we need to develop a technique that measures our success. I'm not sure that the number of homeless is the only thing we need to count. So we need to count how many people we've helped during the year. And that might be a better measurement than the total number of homeless, because as Liz had talked about, and when I've done visits down to homeless encampments, there's flows of people that come into this city that we can't control. So I'd like to count perhaps both, but we need to count how many people we're helping.
Okay. How might we, Mike, go ahead. Were you going to say that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
And it's really not a measure that we've been tracking, and we should be tracking, and I think that's perfectly clear.
Is there a way to incorporate that measurement into the plan? Okay, how might we word that? You're getting your exercise today.
I was planning on it. I think as a strategy is just laying out the programs that are going to be developed through the homelessness plan and data collection measures for each of those.
Okay, does that satisfy it? Specific enough? No. We got to take another crack at that. Okay, I think what I heard was not just the reduction of homelessness, but other services, other initiatives that the city is providing that assist in the area of, like, how many people have we helped? Is that like would you, is like, what, Joe, give me an example of what you might be talking about.
So to me, it sounds like we want to go towards develop the technique to count the number of individuals that we're helping either through the many ways we can do it. So it's not just housing.
Food.
Right, and I know there's a
Transportation.
program that the police use where they try and find somebody's relative in another city. I think what we want is we want to be able to count all those different segments up and know how successful we're being. We want to be able to measure like the total number of people that we're helping.
Okay. Is there a way to incorporate that into the plan?
And things that we are already doing, I think we can work better at providing that data more effectively back to the council, and that's something we can do.
Okay.
How many we've sheltered in the foul weather shelter, how many are in our ARC shelter, how many got relocated into supportive housing. Our team can work on monitoring all that and reporting that information.
Okay, how would we put that into a strategy or a tactic in terms of the plan so council has a good firm sense of, if they put their thumb in the air, they're actually supporting an expectation of what's going to come out?
Maybe a housing services report that can be provided that identifies all the services and supportive programs that have been accomplished in whatever time frame council would like, whether it's quarterly, yearly, and specific persons that were helped and affected by that.
Okay, so included in your housing plan will be a housing services report, which will come to the council on a periodic basis so they can get a kind of an updated snapshot of these services. That would be included in the overall plan. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. And I really don't mean to give you more work, right? But, and I understand what you're saying, let's figure out what it is how we're helping people. I think that's all great, but really the bottom line is, are we making an impact, and is there a reduction in homelessness? And yes, by moving, finding their relatives in another state or a city or whatever, and we move them, that's relocation. That's awesome. We can count those numbers, right? Because at the end of the day, don't we really want to know how many people did we actually get off the streets? Because that's what we're dealing with. This is why it's number one. So, and if it was only 10, okay, then it's only 10. What do we need to do different? But at least let's know what that is. Let's know what the measurable is. And so we can count who we've helped, but let's be very real in regards to, who's been helped off the street. And I think, we have those numbers already. And so it would be great to measure that.
Mike?
Thank you. And as much as I love data, and, for example, we often get, weekly updates on calls for service and things like that. Sometimes data is just sort of a dashboard. I think the spirit of this, and certainly my intention, is not just to see what the data is, but to actually make an improvement in what we're doing over the next year. And we have a lot of the data, but let's put that together and let's say, let's come back and with some measurables for, changes that we have made, and as a result, how many more people we are able to help, even if it's one or two. For that one or two, for that one person, that could be a life-changing day. And
all right,
I think the point is to improve what we're doing. So instead of saying reduce homelessness, it would be increase people moving into stable housing.
Increase the number of people who are moving into stable housing. Okay? Is that the alternative to reduce homelessness? Jim? Okay, how's the rest of the council feel about that? Increase the number of people we are moving into sustainable housing. Okay, Liz?
I just want to add into this that this should include support to keep people housed who are on the edge. I think that's a very important.
That may be, is any kind of rental assistance or anything like that, is that part of the homelessness plan?
So maybe I can provide some context about the homelessness plan. So we've just released the RFP in collaboration with the county, the city of Oxnard, and the city of Thousand Oaks. What this plan is going to do is bring on a consultant that's going to take a look at all the things that we do currently in the city and help us identify the gaps of where we need more resources, more funding, more programs, things of that nature, and help us prioritize so that we can then effectively get funding and implement programs. So I'm a little hesitant to say it's going to do this and that without having a consultant that's going to come on board and take a look at everything that we're doing and help us identify those gaps. So it definitely will be looked at and addressed through this plan. I don't know what the specific tools
Sure.
are going to be at this time.
So, Liz, to your point, to identify resources that may be available to assist those who are on the verge of homelessness, financial resources. Okay. I think that's going to be, all right. Okay, we covered a lot there. Basically, what we want to do is the overall goal here that's going on the big board is to complete the homeless plan by the calendar year of 2023 to be brought back to council for review and approval. All right? Any further dialogue? Give me a thumbs up on that. Bill.
So I love the list right there, and I love everything about that. And if we're not talking about staffing next, I'm a firm thumbs down.
Okay.
Because that is the tallest order of our generation that we're asking Netta and her staff to do, and I don't understand how they do it.
Well, they're already doing
In
it.
a calendar year.
They're already doing it. So we're not adding anything new.
Well, yeah, but our expectations are not small
Well,
in terms of what that's gonna be,
they're,
so, but that's.
did you hear anything that is going to be?
I don't want her to answer.
I do.
Because I know what she's gonna say. She's gonna say she's gonna do it. 'Cause
Okay,
she's-
well,
but she
we need to, if you're going to raise the issue respectfully, we got to ask the staff person if we're asking them too much.
She's gonna say she can do it.
Okay.
We need to provide her the tools.
That wasn't my question, though. Did we add anything new that is, as far as you know, that's not going to be already incorporated into the report? And if we did, can you share with us if there's going to be an undue burden on staff?
Thank you, Bill. Putting together the plan we can do, all of the strategies and policies that come out of it is another thing. And so the realities will need to come into play of the gaps that are identified and the things that need to be done for those policies and strategies. There needs to be a conversation about the staff resources it would take to do those things.
Okay, very good. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Akbar, do you have any comment on that?
She took the words out of my mouth. Really, given the scope that's up on the screen, and I read that as more about the plan. Now, of course, we want to adopt a plan with the intent that we're going to follow through of what's in the plan, but the conversation around resource and staffing needs.
That's a whole other issue.
That will come by way after the strategies are identified.
Right.
Yeah.
So incrementally, you're going to develop a plan. Once you have that plan in place, then we're going to come back to council, and you may want to enhance resources, add resources. To Bill's point, that's going to be a conversation for another day, not this year. Not this year. You want to get the ball over the goal line, get a plan in place, and then you have to develop strategies to meet that goal. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. And I just wanted to share, something the prior council did on this topic, because it is probably the most important thing that we and many other cities are dealing with. We had the Safe and Clean program, and in some ways we sort of split up some of those duties. Safe and Clean had spent a lot of time dealing with, cleanups of encampments or just picking up mattresses. And so that's been moved over to the Parks and Rec Department, and we added a position there to manage that side of it. And then, of course, we brought on a housing manager, Leona Rollins, which was a new position specifically for this. So, we certainly have brought on at the manager level for these things. And certainly when we talk about developing a plan and where we go, I feel pretty comfortable about our capacity.
Does that address your issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be recurring.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think there's a great distinction between develop the plan, that's your goal, it's going to come back, and then within that plan, some of the strategies and resources, that's going to take, that's a whole other discussion. Council will have to look at. So, to revisit, develop and complete a homeless plan this calendar year that includes housing services report that will return to council on a periodic basis to provide an update on services provided. Need a thumbs up. Mike, good, good, good. Okay, that's on the big board. All right, well done. Next item I want to, again, we're trying to get the low-hanging fruit here, that it appears there's already been significant work done. Under economic development, you already have an economic development strategic plan, or you're working on that, correctly?
Just got kicked off earlier this month.
Oh, you just started it?
Yep.
Okay. So that's something council's already got their fingerprints on. Is there anything on here, and this is going to take some discussion, I would expect, under economic development, is there anything on here that council would like to remove as a strategy under economic development?
I mean, so explain to me that, I mean, sure, this is, I love this list, but how is this feasible in terms of getting some document that does all of this?
Well, you're going to have it, go ahead. You have an economic development strategic plan. As part of that strategic, most of these arguably are things that you're going to do. Develop the strategic plan is really the broad goal, and I'm assuming you already have that in place, right?
But we don't do this stuff. We don't build convention centers. We have no control over the fairground. I mean, so how is that a goal?
It's not. That's why I was asking the council. Well, it can be, but I'm just, that's what I'm asking the council. Is there anything on here that you would not want placed in your economic strategic plan? So Johnson Drive improvements.
Sure.
Redevelopment.
Absolutely.
Okay. What does that look like?
Well, if you tie everything into it, if you tie into the Olivas Park, I mean, that's all Olivas Park Road connection, Johnson Drive's on the other side. That is redeveloping that area, which is pretty depressed right now and needs a renovation in regards to what we're doing already, what's already been started over there with mixed-use housing.
Okay, so you'd want to include a consideration for improvements to Johnson Drive redevelopment with a small r in your economic development plan, strategic plan.
Yes.
Okay. How's the council feel about that? You're going to add this to the strategic plan. Do we have thumbs up on that? No, no. One, yes. Two? Halfway? Yes. Okay. Go, Joe.
I need to, it's not that I'm against it, but I need to know, what is it going to take from a time standpoint and resource standpoint to come up with a redevelopment plan for Johnson Corridor?
Let me ask the city manager, is there something about the Johnson Drive corridor that's in your economic strategic plan? Or is there something broader that would address some of these items that are there? There's a variety of things, entertainment complex, city convention center. Is there anything that kind of touches?
Yeah, I'll make a very general comment, and I think someone just, I forget who mentioned this a minute ago, but really the city's role is to create the foundation for these things to take place. Largely, economic development is the private sector really doing its job, but we, of course, play a vital role in that. Putting that aside, some of the items on here are going to be addressed through general plan and through the housing element. Thinking of, since we're talking about Johnson Drive as an example, and Netta's getting her steps in today, so I'll invite her back up. But you know, there are two key sites on Johnson Drive that expressed interest in being included in the housing element, and will, of course, set the stage for redevelopment taking place on Johnson Drive. And I'm going to make one last general comment, then I'll have Netta give her 2 cents. Because the economic development strategy is in its infancy, literally kicked off just a couple of short weeks ago, what I was hoping we can get from this council is maybe some broad goals that they would love to see, outcomes that they would love to see from the economic development strategy. As the council will recall, our former mayor, Bill Fulton, is the one leading us on that effort. He's our consultant. It'd be helpful for him going about this project to understand from the council, what are the broad goals you'd like to see? And then the strategies that come out of that, of course, will be developed with staff and the ED subcommittee with council. That's all I got to say on that topic. And then I'd like Netta to touch on perhaps Johnson Drive, since we were just talking about it.
Okay.
Thank you. So there were several properties on Johnson Drive that expressed interest in redevelopment and to include housing into it. Those were all property owners that reached out to us wanting to be included, both in the general plan update and the housing element. So in a few months, the council will see rezoning of those sites as identified in the housing element with the addition of a form-based code overlay. We continue to be in conversation with them about wanting to move forward. So the interest is still there on that, as well as some of these other goals you have listed under economic development can be folded into the land use alternatives discussions that are going on right now about areas and opportunities for shopping upgrades or other uses that we'd like to see in the city.
Go ahead, Jim.
And the only reason, there's a couple reasons. Number one, obviously, I'm in District 6, so that's in the area I'm at. But I was reading the goals from last year. In 2022-23 scope was revitalize the Johnson Corridor through initiatives beyond just the housing element. So it wasn't like I was trying to add something new. It was already part of this.
Right. Okay. Liz?
Yeah, so not to add anything new, I think this is a extensive, exhaustive list. I would say any of the projects listed here that are on the west side actually are already kind of on the ground running and preparing to come to the city. And so what I think we need to do is, unless we find something egregious, agree to strongly support these goals. There's nothing here that's negative for the city, except perhaps we have to ensure that we protect our city in climate issues regarding these.
I just want to go back to what the city manager said, though. What would help the staff is on economic development, some broad themes, some broad goals that they would like to see staff focus on as part of the plan. Is that what I heard you say, Akbar?
Yes.
Like, looking at this list, is there something that jumps out that might be an example? Like, for example, I'll pick one, upgrade shopping opportunities. I think that already came up. What specifically, in terms of a broad goal, do you think may be helpful for council to kick around and consider?
Well, if I may pivot to a different example, we've been pouring a lot of resources in making Main Street Moves a success. That was I think a very well-intentioned and it's proven to be successful. And there will continue to be a lot more work associated with continuing that program. I would assume that the council would want to support those activities, but a reconfirmation or saying that, focus on a vibrant downtown, including Main Street, that might be an example of something.
Okay.
But again, there's probably several on this list.
Any thoughts on what you heard the city manager say? Kind of complete the Main Street downtown corridor?
And again, that's an example. I would want some broad direction from the council on.
Any thoughts on that?
More items.
Bill?
How did we not already do that? And again, nothing with the Akbar it's right here. It's item right there. Downtown Main Street Moves. The first thing we do is reaffirm our establishment of.
So you're saying it's already there? Got it.
And what I would add that is not already there, and unfortunately, Councilmember Halter's not here today, but again, some of that focus on the Mission Park area. We did set up the ad hoc committee to work on some of those issues, and I think that's just an important part of Main Street Moves.
Is there anything on this list that we're not currently doing that there's some interest in exploring? And it's okay to throw things out there. Like somebody said, on your build a convention center. Well, the fact of the matter is, if the city wanted to build a convention center, you could. Council votes on it, then you allocate the capital money for it, and then you allocate the staff to run the convention center, and then you build it, and then you have a convention center. I'm not suggesting that, but it is doable. So as you look at this list, is there anything on here that we're not currently doing that you'd like to have some dialogue in order to add to economic development? Bill and then Liz.
So I feel like the larger goal in terms of build a convention center is become an overnight destination. I mean, my concern is that we're arrogant in terms of let's build a convention center, not realizing if that's what the market needs. We're, in a post-COVID world, are people going to conventions? Are they, so we make it a goal and nobody comes. You know, that would be my concern. So I think that we need to keep these goals at larger levels. So I think the idea of becoming an overnight destination, and maybe through the economic development plan, a convention center is part of that, that would be fine. But getting into some of these specifics, I think, is arrogant none of us are subject matter experts in, any of one particular area.
Fair enough. Liz?
So I would like to add to the list, supporting the, not financially, but supporting building a trade school in the old Avenue School. It's already in the works and it's already supported by the county.
It's already in the works? That's already part of I don't have that in front of me, so, okay. Anything new? Because then we're going to move on. If there's really nothing earth-shattering here, we'll move on.
I think Ms. Campos wants to finish.
Well, yeah, it's not on this list. It's the county that is supporting it. We need to accept it because it's in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So,
Do you want to comment on that?
I think there's probably more information to share with the council. I think it's a laudable goal. From what I understand, it's a school district owned site that they have challenges with currently, mainly because to rehab that site would mean deferring a lot of maintenance at some of their schools that are being used. So that's why it's a challenge for them. I'm not saying it's not my role to caution council on what to take on or not undertake. It's I think there's more information that we need to come back to council on to kind of share what the challenges might be.
Okay. Mike? Then Jim.
Thank you. First on that topic, I definitely think supporting the trade school there on the west side, I do think that should be part of our economic development strategy. We're not the ones that are going to be building it. The important thing is that the city support it. And if there are obstacles that the county can't, that the school district can't overcome, well, then so be it. I think it's important that the city affirmatively support that.
Okay.
Looking at some of these things, pro-business city, support for local business, I'm not really sure, how that would work as a goal. I've said this before, I think one of the best things we could do to support businesses is to reduce that barrier to opening a business, and that is the net zero water fee that we collect.
I'm gonna just jump on what Mike was saying to kind of keep us moving here. I didn't want to edit these things, but I would agree with Mike's assessment, and I hope you would too, that some of these things they're really not goals. They're things that you'd like to see, their vision, support certain programs, not necessarily a goal, but something that's ongoing that the city does. I think what the city manager is looking for in the city staff is something specific, if there is, and it's okay if there isn't because you're already doing a number of things. Is there something specific you want to add to your economic development strategies that you'd like the staff to work on over the next, year or 2 years? Jim, then Bill.
Were you done, Mike?
No, we can continue.
You can go back and forth. It's not a council meeting that way.
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily think that we need to add anything new, any big projects new right now, because there's a lot of areas that we still need to develop, we still need to take care of. And I think we have a very busy department right now just handling the things. But if you just go back to our project goals for last year, business retention and resiliency, business engagement program, marketing for business recruitment, build Ventura's brand as. I don't think we.
You think we're there?
We're there.
Okay.
I mean, it's already here. We're
Bill.
doing it.
Sorry. So, fundamentally, I believe economics is the study of incentives. So I hear what, our public speakers are saying regarding greenhouse gas initiatives and everything like that. I believe that those belong in economic development in terms of offering incentives to move towards, greenhouse gas, and I think there are things that the city can do under economic development that will incentivize people to do an all-electric home, for example,
Right.
that they'll be asking. And I think this is where that belongs.
It's a
So-
combination, wouldn't you say? Because that bleeds over into housing, smart growth, green buildings, that type of thing, and economic development.
Not 100%, no. I mean, I believe that we need to offer the incentives to do it.
Okay.
And I think this is the opportunity to do it. So
what would be a goal? How would we word that?
Well, I mean, I can give you like an example. So let's say, pick any new project. If you choose to go all electric, your impact fees aren't due until certificate of occupancy.
Got it.
So now we've reduced that carry cost from, let's say, we're paying $1 million in fees. So now you've taken that carry cost by a year, so I don't know, I'll let Joe do the math on that really quick in his head, but.
$4,500.
Does the city do some incentives for lack of a better description, green, environmentally friendly type development? Is there, in terms of impact fees, does the city offer credits or anything like that along the ways?
I'm going to speak off the top of my head. And if some of our directors have better information than I do, please step up to the mic. But in terms of impact fees, now that I'm aware of, we do offer, I'll say, very healthy rebates for water savings. I'll say we're kind of a county leader in that way, and what we are able to offer our water and wastewater customers. In terms of impact fees, I'm not aware of any for, I'll say, going above and beyond state building code for environmental reasons.
Clarify, I'm not talking about a reduction in impact fees or anything like that. I think there are things that we can do through our economic development plan that will incentivize the use of green technology.
Okay. That may be, is that something that, let's put that in a goal, into some language that's a goal. Develop
Incentives
to enhance.
to adopt green technology. I mean, what can we do?
Okay.
How do we reduce that? I mean, the industry pushback is cost.
Got it. Okay.
So how do we reduce that cost? There are
Okay.
things that we can do as a city that cost us zero. For example, we still collect the full fee.
Yeah.
But why do we collect it at building permit versus certificate of occupancy, where you're carrying $1 million, at the end of the day, the pie is only this big.
Right.
Right? When you're looking at the profitability of anything, right? So it's just how does it get cut up?
Okay.
Right? So right now, the bank, because we're funding that site, so the bank is getting a bigger piece of the pie. What if I can put that, that slice over to green technology?
Okay. So let me take a crack at this and give you guys an opportunity. So develop incentives that would encourage green technology.
The use of, yeah.
Use of green technology.
We're not gonna
Develop
require it.
I get it. Develop incentives that would encourage the use of green technology. That would go into your economic development theme. Let me see a thumb. Jeanette? Okay, that's on the big board. That's on the big board. Okay, we're going to keep moving here. Another piece of low-hanging fruit here. You guys are doing well. I'm going to jump to fire services.
Hold on. 10-minute break.
Okay, like I said, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Okay, let's get started again. While Andy gets wired up.
I like it.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay, welcome back. All right, we're going to move to hopefully another piece of low-hanging fruit here because it's something council has already dealt with, and that is your fire services. Fire services. It's on the list. There was a variety of things here. As council be aware, and I think the new council members are aware too, council last year endeavored for yet another attempt to address the issue of fire services here in the city of Ventura. I mentioned, along with my partner, we did a significant outreach with the community. That involved interviews with all council members, a review of all the past reports, and then we did community outreach at all 6 fire stations, outlining to the community, kind of giving them a public education of where you're at with respect to your infrastructure, your apparatus, and your staffing, your response times. We kind of covered the full litany of things. City has already spent a lot of time and money on a lot of other reports, so rather than just give you a redundant report, we reported back that these things that are in the report are validated, that they are where the city is at with respect to your fire services. So it was a 2-part project. First, to go out and do the community education, kind of let the public know this is where you're at, and then report back to council, and then secondarily, go back out to the community now that they've been educated and talk to the community about potential funding sources, areas where they may want to consider if there's an interest in adding resources for the fire department, specifically probably at least 1 new fire station, upgrading a couple of fire stations that are very old and well beyond their lifespan, and maybe even considering enhanced resources with respect to emergency services. So how would you pay for that? There's a variety of things that we shared with council. We had not shared that with the community. So council has a little bit of sense of where the community is at. The idea was that we would go out and we would engage in dialogue and discussions. No decisions obviously would be made, but get a little bit of a temperature for the council on where the community is at with respect to its appetite to look at certain funding sources or alternatives to enhance or address your issues with fire services. So on this particular one, it basically would be complete the fire services initiative. And that ultimately would be brought back to council to determine if and how, if you wanted to enhance your fire services, how would you go about doing that? One of the things that we talked about is looking at possibly the county coming in and providing services. So that would be on your list, by the way. There's a price tag to that. Nobody really knows what it is, but it's something to be looked at. And as I mentioned to council, it could be a combination of things where the city may look at improving the infrastructure, and then they would look at maybe the cost of Ventura County coming in and providing the services, or a combination thereof. But fire services, you're only halfway there. We went out and we did the community outreach. I think your community is well educated on where you're at. If council wants to take the next step, the next logical step would be to go back out to the community on community meetings and talk about the different funding sources, the different options that would be available. And that would be done with your city staff, likely your finance director, who will walk them through what city bonding looks like. We'd have some information to provide for the community on what the cost might be to the city if the Ventura County took it over in part. So that would be both a public education process and get some feedback from the community on what their appetite might be for that. So that's kind of gives you a Reader's Digest version of where we're at with fire services. What would council like to do on that? It's on your list. There's a variety of things here to talk about: funding, a long-term plan, underground and utilities, vulnerable fire services, evacuation routes. That's all done by the fire department. Some of these are tasks and they're operational. They're not really goals. But the broader issue is, what do you want to do with respect to the fire services? You want to put that as a goal to accomplish this year, to at least complete the study on where you're at, and then you guys can decide what it is you want to do.
Yes.
Joe.
No, I think we need to complete the initiative, come back with options, see which ones are palatable, how are we going to pay for it, and one of the options has to be to compare that to what it would take if the county were to come in.
Right.
So I think all the options need to come back to us.
So the goal would be complete the fire services study.
Correct.
That's the broader goal, and then I gave you the guys quick the Reader's Digest version of what all that implies. So, Bill,
What's the time frame of that?
this year,
So in the it will say, fire service study coming back.
the fire services study, that's internal, that would be completed this year. And as part of that would be the information council would need probably sometime next year to figure out what it is you're going to do. Are you going to put a bond measure on the ballot? Are you going to engage in, you'll have more information to figure out what you're going to do. One thing I can tell you, and I think the existing council members recognize, sooner or later, the city of Ventura is going to have to deal with their fire department. Your stations are, some of them were built in the 1950s or earlier. They're not designed for the size of the apparatus we have today. The fire service has changed tremendously over the last 50, 60 years. It's really it's a combination of an EMS agency now in terms of emergency medical service and fire. Your firefighters are, they're all certified paramedics, so your system is integrated. So there's a lot of moving parts to that that actually has an impact on, how council wants to proceed on that. At the end of the day, public safety is a political decision. Tell the people all along. It's just, you get to decide your level of fire service and how it's best provided to your residents. I would point out on your attitude survey, notwithstanding the condition of your fire service in terms of the infrastructure, your firefighters are providing, I believe, they're number one on the list. If they're not number one, they're way up there. So your community is satisfied with their fire service. But as council is aware, as we pointed out in the study, you're running into, I'm not going to say daily, hourly collisions where you have insufficient resources and you're getting longer and longer response times. So that's really another issue that council has to grapple with. But the goal would be complete the fire services study this calendar year. Questions, comments, any more discussion? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. While we're on this topic, what is listed here that is not within the fire services initiative is clearly identify evacuation routes. The city of Ventura is really one of the few cities its size that has an emergency services director. Of course, we had Dan Wall, and he's left, and we now have Mac Douglas. I certainly appreciate all the work that's been done, but I would like one of our goals to be some sort of public outreach as we come up, for example, with the evacuation routes so that people can see all the work that's been done. Certainly, members of the public were told that stuff was going to come a year and a half ago, and it hasn't. And we really owe it to the people to show that we are taking this seriously.
Okay. So the easy one with that is, I'm going to look at the city manager and tell the city manager that Dave's got another initiative he needs to accomplish, because that's 100% within the realm of the fire department to do those community meetings.
But it's actually in the police department.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, I just stand corrected. The cops actually do handle the evacuation, right? In conjunction with the fire department, because they got to tell them this is what we need. Okay, thanks, Mike, for that clarification. All right, so Bill?
I kind of want to build on what Mike said, is I have the benefit of being the post-COVID council, on the council. We're here in person 3 years. Kudos to my colleagues that were here during COVID and everything like that. But one of the things that came out of COVID that has always bothered me was the incredible mistrust of government, even at the local level. And one of my concerns, building on what Mike said, is we've lived the Thomas fire, but it's the earthquake that is inevitable that's going to happen, and that lack of trust. And I think we need to further those evacuation routes, everything like that, it's 72 hours that we're on our own, and they're going to need to be able to trust that the city of Ventura is here to help them. They always make what was Reagan's joke, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help, the scariest word, but that's going to be the reality, and I think that needs to be incorporated as part of that, is that, for 72 hours, the city of Ventura is all you got. I mean, and I think we're in a more perilous position in terms of we're connected via the 101, the 118, Victoria and Harbor, and the reality is we could lose our connections to the rest of Southern California, as well as quite easily our connection to our neighbors to the north, quite easily in any major disaster. And we saw that as part of the Thomas Fire when you had the Montecito flooding. So I think that just needs to be built into this in terms of, I realize it's beyond the fire service initiative, but it's part of the fire challenge.
I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm assuming the city has a disaster response plan that incorporates fires, earthquake, any number, tsunami, any number of natural disasters, and how the city would respond to what Bill's talking about?
Yeah, for the timing of this is good. We just, I got to check and see where we're at status-wise, but the hazard mitigation plan that we had an outdated one, we recently have updated it. I don't know if it's 100% adopted yet. I got to check in on that, but that was something that was sorely needed. So with response to this item, I would need to check with Mac Douglas and Chief Schindler to see if that can be woven in, but that we could report back on that on February 13th.
Maybe it's not woven in, maybe it is a separate.
The
fire. I don't want to take away.
Yeah, the fire services study is really a deal. My question is, maybe the chief knows, but or do you have a city disaster response plan that incorporates this kind of a all risk, earthquake, flood, Chief, do you know if they got it? Because it's really a separate issue, but it's something that if you don't, that might be something you consider for a goal.
Yeah, not a master plan for disaster. We do have internal policies and procedures for each one of those topics, each one of those types of disasters, but not one big master plan of that.
Yeah. Again, my concern is kind of what Mike said, is that we're rolling that out to the public so that we're building that trust back in terms of that, hey, there's a plan, we're not going to use it today, hopefully we never use it, but the message is there's a plan, trust us, we're from the government, we're here to help.
Okay, let's do this. Go ahead, Liz. Thank you, Joe.
So Mac came in on the heels of a lot of work that Dan Wall was doing, and the West Side worked with him to help get all materials translated into Spanish. So I can tell you I have intimate connection to the previous work that was done, and it includes everything, every possibility. Floods coming this way, earthquakes, tsunami, fire, other emergencies like a gas explosion that we're not prepared for yet. All of that is included in what was handed to Mac. And so he's well-grounded, and he's got a great staff working with him. So I think that we're already beyond that point, Bill.
Right. Again, mine is the education.
Well, you'd have to have a plan so you can take it out to the community and educate them. But Liz, let me just, so there's this document, because it would be a document, already exists?
The document for evacuation, and I believe grant money was awarded to the city to do CERT training in every one of our community council districts in both English and Spanish, with a possibility in one neighborhood of another language being added.
Okay. All right, so first things first, let's deal with the fire services study, because it looked like everybody's poised to do that. So complete the fire services study within this calendar year. Thumbs up. Good. Okay, that goes on the big board. And then as a second issue, I want to kind of run this one to ground here. Council has an interest in, one, the city having a plan, and two, that plan being communicated and shared with the public so everybody kind of understands it. This is what we're going to do in the event of X, and then, of course, when X happens, you're going to have to go out and re-educate everybody, because they'll forget. Okay. Let me ask Akbar, would because it sounds like there's work been done, would it be fair to say develop a citywide disaster response plan and education plan and education, or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think that could be a good way to develop a goal around this. As Liz pointed out, we have a lot of the pieces of it. Some of it's going to be building upon what's already been done, as she mentioned, and packaging it together and sharing that as a comprehensive document to the community in a way that can be digested. This is completely navigable, and we can do it. The only caution I have is when we roll this out, because a lot of this will fall to Heather and her team in conjunction with the public safety departments, is if there are other messages that we are going to be messaging out there, and we can't crowd the airwaves all at once. So we're going to have to segment these in a way that the community can digest them.
Right.
So we're not cannibalizing the message with other things we need to get across. Because we're going to be talking about fire services, we're going to be talking about the general plan, things of that nature. So I would ask that, yes, we can take it on, but just make sure that we segment it in such a way that we can share the message in a
I think his point
in a good
well
way.
taken. We don't want to confuse the public, and we definitely don't want to dilute them. The fire services study is one component that is, I would say that has to be addressed. The development of a community disaster response plan and education that's a whole separate deal. Okay, so any more dialogue, discussion on develop a community response disaster and education plan? Mike?
Thank you. I just want to, I think it's a great idea, and my feedback to staff on this would be, if it becomes this huge unwieldy document, it doesn't have to be one giant document that is released at one time, that it can be broken up, and maybe showing people where we are with evacuation routes would just be one step, and publishing the first part of a comprehensive plan.
We have them. They're not that big. They're divided into, here's how you self-care, shut your gas off, just, okay, here's the evacuation, here's what you do in the event of earthquake. They're not that big.
Okay.
Yeah, they're definitely manageable. Okay, so we give a thumbs up on develop a citywide community disaster response and education plan.
I'm voting for Doug.
Okay, that goes on the big board. That goes on the big board. Okay, we're going to move to item 4, and we're going to combine, with your permission, transportation and traffic and infrastructure, because there's some carryover. Not totally, but there's some carryover. Okay? Some of these could be used as goals. Some of these are basically they're tasks or strategies. And then I'll give you an example. What would be something the council maybe consider as a goal? Raise the standards across the city for maintenance of roads, sidewalks, medians, parking strips, public spaces, repair or encourage property owners to fix curbs, gutters. Okay, so raise the standards. So most cities have standards A through F. Okay, correct?
We're talking about pavement maintenance right now?
Yeah.
A through F typically refers to levels of service.
I'm sorry, right.
So PCI, pavement condition index, is the metric that we use.
Thank you for that clarification. So that could be measurable. That's measurable. That's something that would be done not in 1 year. Capital improvements but it would be assistance for you as you do your capital budget. If your goal is to raise the standards of the roads in terms of when they're resurfaced, repaved, and all that stuff, that would be very helpful for city staff, because that's how they're going to allocate the resources. Joe?
Yeah, I really think that's important. So as I understand PCI, it's a pavement index, and I think we're at the 50th percentile. And I know all of us know from the emails that we've been getting and from driving around, I think we need to up that. And so that's a great discussion, because then that's going to have budget implications as well. So if we make a decision to do that, we got to be able to walk the talk.
Right. Any other thoughts? Liz?
Adding what's listed here under transportation with infrastructure, there's a little bit that doesn't overlap. Walkable city, which should include planting trees and just overall taking into consideration the impacts of climate on where we live right now, which may need to be with infrastructure or may need to be separated. I'm not sure. We really need to increase the number of people using the buses and try and reduce traffic and mitigate that. And I know you guys get sick of hearing this, but we're in an emergency state right now. That's why the federal and state government are talking about it so much. So regarding transportation, we need to maybe separate out or incorporate, but vote strongly for those issues when we're talking about infrastructure.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Bill?
I would like to see it as two parts, I think. I think there's the reality of what we have in place and then trying to get to where we need to be on it. And I think they should be two separate, items on it. But I think the other thing is what's important is that we're incorporating as we do new stuff that we're, the future stuff. So I think probably the biggest advocate of micromobility among us is Mike Johnson.
Those would be two separate goals, though, to your point. Yeah, that's what Liz was talking about is very different than, one could suggest that having a walkable and bikeable city is an outcome you're trying to achieve. How you would go about doing that would be, develop more bike routes, develop more, whatever would be a walkable city, pocket parking lots, that type of thing. So that's a separate issue than Joe's issue, which was really your infrastructure. It's, to raise your level of standards for the conditions of your roads. And then what does that look like? That gets transmitted over to your capital improvement budget.
Yeah, one of the things that I don't think we say enough, and I say in the general plan meetings all the time, is we are the 290th largest city in the United States. And we're one of the oldest cities in California, and our infrastructure has real needs.
Yep.
On it. And I just don't think we say that enough, that, in terms of our size and in terms of our age.
Right. Okay, so we're going to get a thumbs up on, or give this a whirl. Raise the standards across the city for maintenance of roads, sidewalks, mediums, parking strips, and public places. Thumbs up.
Can I add?
Go ahead, of course.
I'd like to add ADA access.
Okay.
Improve.
Raise the standards of ADA access across, okay, let's figure out how you got to noodle that out a little bit. What's that look like?
Liz.
Because I'm thinking it could be a separate issue.
Well, I don't know, because a lot of the ADA access issues aren't something that is a brand-new fix. City Hall has some things that have to be brand-new fixes because I came in there. But we have so many injuries happen on our sidewalks, on curb cuts that are way too steep that weren't done right, and it's hard to get them put back once the concrete's there. Inaccessible sidewalks because of inlay bricks and deterioration because of bad weather, and those are things that we just haven't taken care of for years.
Right, how do we, who's your public works person? How do we address, because this is, just so council's kind of oriented on what we're presently talking about is really about repaving your streets of your roads, your conditions, your roads, your streets, your medians, hardscape stuff. I hear what Liz is saying as an example would be curb cutouts.
Right, but if you're repaving a street, you should at that time fix all the things that are on those blocks that are there.
Could you help us with that? I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah, my name's Peter Shade. I'm with Public Works. So the way that this is written, it's a lot of things all mixed together. I would say the standards you're probably talking about is the condition of the roads, not the standards. So standards may be a measure of what we want, but a condition is what we have now. So you want to increase the condition, I think, of the roads. Typically, we're handling, except for some landscaping, typically we're handling mostly roads and the pavement condition as a project, whereas largely the medians and sidewalks would be handled differently. Even sidewalks would be handled differently than medians, because sidewalks are going to be about pedestrian access, both both the condition of the displacements as well as the ADA ramps. We're handling those. We're doing quite a bit of work in that now. I know on the west side with the Affordable Housing Authority, there's a big project coming down that will address a lot of that as well. But talking to Jeff about our transportation principal engineer, there's probably about 400 locations, crossings where we currently have ADA issues that we need to address, and we're probably doing about 50 a year currently. So, and that's a matter of funding and staffing to carry out those projects.
Go ahead.
It would be helpful as we flush out this goal, because I think the main pieces of it are there. I think it'd be helpful for staff if the council were to define what they see as a success. So for example, when we talk about pavement condition index, I think right now our most recent report, Peter, we're at about 65 citywide as an average. For example, if the city council said, you know what, in 5 years, we want to increase 1 point per year, so that in 5 years from now, we're at a 70 citywide, that is something that we can kind of go back to the drawing table with and say, this is what it would take in terms of additional funding. Similarly, there are certain metrics, and I think this is what Peter was getting at. If you were to look at sidewalks, maybe one metric is reduce the number of trip and fall claims that we get by improving our sidewalk maintenance. Another one could be for, the ADA, if we're doing 50 a year, could that become 75 or 80 per year to make that a higher goal as well. So those kinds of metrics would be helpful for us as the council better defines this goal.
All right, I think council may need a lot more information on that, but go ahead, Bill.
Mine's a point of information. Well, what is a parking strip?
What's a parking strip?
I'm not sure what,
I don't know.
I'm not sure what that's referring to myself, actually.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's the
professional answer right there.
Public parking areas or some of our public parking lots.
Yeah, keep in mind, these are, I did my level best to basically almost dictate what I heard from you and didn't worry about if it was correct, factually, whatever. I just wanted to capture it and then we'd work it out.
Just want to make sure if we're giving them a goal, it's something that they.
Yeah. Mike?
Thank you. And one of the things that triggered this for me, in my district, we've got Whittier Street, and you can't go down the sidewalk, either sidewalk in a wheelchair. You can't do it if you're using a walker. You can't do it if you're using a cane. And if you're able-bodied like me, you probably want to put on some hiking boots because the sidewalks are so disrupted. And understandably, the city has looked at resources and said, well, it's not a really well-traveled street. Well, for the people that live on that street, some of whom are disabled, some of whom use canes, walkers, and wheelchairs, it leaves them walking in the street. And I don't think that's acceptable. We've got to make we've got to prioritize some of those projects just in terms of sidewalks and repairs like that.
Okay, so the city manager asked a question, and I think this is going to be helpful for them. So he gave you a couple of metrics. So within the next 5 years, your road conditions go from 65 to 70. Did I hear that?
This is as an example.
As an example, your sidewalks, you're doing 50 a year sidewalk replacement.
That was referring to ADA ramps.
ADA?
Yeah.
You could bump that up to another number. How would you want to, and your capital budget will be reflected in exactly what you're saying. Because when you get your budget, he's going to give you, this is what we need to do over the next 5 years to achieve that. And it's quite okay to have a goal that you achieve over the next 5 years because you're going to do this incrementally. It's actually a great way to approach this.
I think we should increase to 5 or 6 per year above 50 if 50 is the number we're doing right now. So I think we just really need to push it up for safety reasons because, if we're not spending the money fixing the safety issues, we're going to spend it on lawsuits. And that may cost us a lot more for each individual place that there's a problem.
Okay, so, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, instead of trying to solve the exact number now, that tell staff to come back and say, with 3 options, so if we do it 1% per year over the next 5 years.
I like it.
Right, versus 2 or 3 or what it is, and then we'll know what we can afford, because I know last year, Mike, on finance, audit, and budget, I think we put $1 million into sidewalks, and 5 years ago, we were spending $45,000. And so a lot of that came from, frankly, the oldsters on the city council. We got tired of meeting at 5 o'clock and settling lawsuits. So I think if we continue along that vein and keep allocating money to kind of the meat and potatoes of the city, then we're going to get there. We'll be in a better place.
Okay, so that's helpful. So if going on with Joe's line of thinking was, the goal would be to increase conditions across the city for maintenance of roads, sidewalks, medians, and public spaces. And then that's your goal. That will be your thumbs up. And then council or staff will bring back to you some of the metrics of what those look like with, flesh it out so you know what you're doing as far as the cost goes. But at least they have a roadmap on, you can plan on them bringing that back to you.
I was wondering if everybody would accept improved conditions instead of increased conditions, because we can increase bad conditions, which I don't think is where we want to go.
Okay, so improve conditions across the city for maintenance of roads, sidewalks, medians, and public spaces. Do we have a thumbs up for that?
Andy, can I ask one clarifying question?
Yeah.
Could we agree on a definition for public spaces? Because I can interpret that many ways. It'd be helpful to get some clarity around what was intended.
Feedback? What's a public space? It's not a park, right? What's a public space?
Public spaces would include gathering places that are already accessible. Our parks are not accessible. There isn't proper ADA access to any of our park spaces. Even the one that's our accessible park is unreachable if you don't own a car. And you can't get from the parking lot up to the bathrooms or the drinking fountains. And so, we could define a public space technically legally, but what it is for a person in a wheelchair or blind is very different.
You have Parks Department, right? Or a Parks Rec and Park Board?
We do. No, we have a Parks Department. Yeah.
Okay, so it's within your...
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts on public spaces? We're not going to change the language, but just to give them a flavor of what you're talking about.
So I'm looking at Santa Clara and California Street. There's that corner, which would be considered a public space. Yes, it's sidewalks on the outside, but you also have an area where there's stairs and a sitting area. That might be, is that something we're thinking about? Okay.
Got enough there, Mr. City Manager?
That helps very much. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I think we have thumbs up on that goal. But just to make sure, improve conditions across the city for maintenance of roads, sidewalks, medians, and public spaces. Thumbs up.
No, I'm there.
Okay.
The definition of public spaces.
Good man. Okay.
How about Doug? Where's Doug at?
Jeanette, you're good?
Doug's anti.
Okay. All right. There's one other item here. There's one other item here. It's not related. It's really standalone. I think council needs to provide some direction on. You have seek to implement a long-term program to underground utilities across the city. And then it's actually a comment here, but really the goal would be implement a long-term program to underground utilities across the city. Let's have some discussion on that.
Sorry, it's bothering me on the last one. Because I think there's an opportunity to do the EV charging when we talk about public spaces as part of our traffic and implementation. So I want parking lots, like in terms of the public spaces where we're doing the EV charging improvements. I think it's all tied in together there, if that makes any.
I don't know that it does or doesn't. I'm not sure. flesh that out a little bit more, because this is basically to improve roads, parkways. Now we're talking about parking lots, adding EV stations to parking lots?
Well, if we're talking about roads, we're moving to an electrification part of it. We have to start putting that infrastructure in.
Right.
So if we're doing these improvements, we've got to have that in mind.
Okay, so that's a separate deal, though. So you're talking about adding EV stations?
Maybe. I just don't want it to not be considered.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know,
No right or wrong answer. I mean, it's got to, they have to have clarity. So, but adding EV stations sprinkled along the roads or in parking lots, that would be a separate council goal. And then there would be a cost to that. Go ahead, Liz.
So I'm sure that if Doug were here, he would be speaking eloquently about the undergrounding of utilities. Because, Tim, it's a very important issue, which we saw during the Thomas fire. Some of those flames were dangerously close to the wires all over town. It's a big task, because on the avenue, we undergrounded just the wires on the avenue about 11 or 12 years ago. But it was a process that took 3 years, because it's so complicated with the other things that are underground and having access to the wires. So it's something that Public Works will have to devote an awful lot of time to if we're talking about the whole city.
It's expensive, too. In Thousand Oaks, I don't know if you guys do, we do it through the development process. Is somebody's going to redevelop, they're paying for undergrounding of facilities. Yeah, so, but I don't want to, okay, I want to go back to the EV. Is there interest on the part of the council to explore adding EV stations along streets and in parking lots? That's the question.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's being considered. I want to know it's being considered.
Yeah.
As part of the.
How would we form that up?
If you're tearing open a road, does it make sense to?
In terms of us adding conduit and making sure that.
It's being considered. That's all I'm.
Understood. We may need to do a little bit more research on this. I think the council voicing its interest in wanting to see this is helpful. There's two other pieces of data I think I'd like to mention. One is we did talk about EVs in the economic development portion of this discussion. I don't know if that was, I am not seeing the big board, but if that was still incorporated. The other thing too is the council may recall we did adopt a EV blueprint some time ago. In that document are strategies to advance our EV charging infrastructure. I'd want to take another look at those and just see if that addresses the council's desire to, as you said, make more of these opportunities for charging available along our arterials. But if I know that there's council interest in doing so, I just want to consult those documents and bring that back on the 13th.
Okay. Would the council be comfortable with a report back from staff? Sounds like there's already some existing work on this, a report back from staff, and then you can proceed as appropriate.
No, I think when the second entrance was added to Community Park, they added some EV stations. So I think they're thinking about it, but I mean, I just think we need to make sure that we're thinking about it every time. If there's an opportunity to do it, you know, if we're going to stop selling gas engines in 2035, we're way behind the 8 ball in terms of getting the appropriate number of chargers.
All right, is council comfortable with a report back from staff? Not necessarily a goal, but a report back from staff so you're kind of eyes wide open on what it is you want to do on that? Thumbs up on that? Okay. Okay, now let's go back to the undergrounding. Expensive endeavor, but a lot of cities are doing it for a whole bunch of reasons. Mike?
Thank you. You know, it's several $100,000s per pole, and, you know, some cities, it costs money not just to underground the utilities, but then it costs more to maintain them as well, and it can reduce vulnerability to something like fire, but increase your vulnerability in a situation like an earthquake. And, you know, there was also, I think, a comment about how this can reduce people's insurance. That's been made. While I oppose it, you know, I think council is going to need to have a conversation and hear about what those options are, and also about what the funding opportunities are. I would not support setting aside a fixed percentage of the city budget to underground utilities but there are things like special districts that could get that done. And so I would like to see it come back to council with sort of a broad overview to take the temperature of council for its willingness on this.
Okay, so, go ahead, Bill.
So, again, I think there's an opportunity here, if we're undergrounding the system, which sounds like generally there's favorability of, is the system adequate? I mean, so it's not just, we're gonna take the existing lines and put them down, where I couldn't plug my EV in this summer because it was too hot, we didn't have enough. So do we have the appropriate transformers? Like, when we're doing this, there's an opportunity to do it right on it. So I can't think it's just underground. It's literally, we need to create the 21st century city that we all want to live in. And it's going to be, an electrification is the.
All right, so what I heard Mike say was actually not interested in a council goal, but a report back from staff on what it actually what we're really dealing with here.
As long as it comes back, a goal.
Yeah, because the goal would be to move forward on it.
A goal could also be, the council, gets a report and has a workshop on it, for example.
Okay, that's a goal. Community workshop on the feasibility of undergrounding.
Yes.
Okay. I saw you were nodding before, Joe.
I agree with everything Mike said.
Okay.
So far today.
Okay, so to this calendar year, hold a workshop, community workshop, on the feasibility. Council workshop, okay, on the feasibility of undergrounding utilities citywide. Okay, everybody understand what that goal would be? All right, need a thumbs up. Jim? Bill? Bill's in between? Okay. What do we need to do to tweak this to get a thumb in the air?
I mean, we collect funds every month from Edison to underground. We have an underground program going on. What is the goal of having a workshop? It is feasible. It's a cost, it's 100% a cost item.
Well, that would be feasibility. It's, the last time I checked,
Right, but
it's like $1 million a mile. It's probably close to 2 million now.
So, okay, so it's a math formula now. 1 million times 230 miles of line, or whatever, it's gonna cost 235 million. I mean, it's just, what do we, it is feasible. It's a cost item. Like, what do I want to know beyond that?
Go ahead.
So, we do collect that fee, and there is undergrounding that goes on. What has been talked about at council is that we need to move much more aggressively and underground, starting with all the poles in the hillsides.
Right, so that's a different, it's not a feasibility. We
Well,
know it's feasible.
So the issue has been that this has been brought up on the periphery many times, and I think, for example, I have certain assumptions and premises that are not shared by some of my colleagues. And council is going to have to talk about it. This is an unresolved goal. I'm happy to have that conversation. But one of the things to talk about, for example, is the use of special districts. There are other funding options. And there are other, it was proposed at our last goal-setting meeting that something like a certain percentage of our budget be devoted to
I want to have that conversation. I already know it's feasible.
Okay, I think what we're not going to handcuff anybody. I think the idea would be have an all-encompassing study on the ramifications, the feasibility, the financial ability to look at undergrounding utilities citywide.
Again, this is where I start to have issues, not with, I'm sure, absolutely, we should have undergrounded maybe 100 years ago, whatever. How much staff resources do we have? Like, so now we're telling Public Works to go fix the roads, figure, and by the way, on your spare time, come back with a feasibility study on undergrounding citywide utilities. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just concerned about, are we adequately funded? Do we have the staff to
Well, that's what we discussed in your workshop.
Yeah.
That would be discussed in your workshop.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know, the city staff does it. I think Edison has a role in that as well, so. So again, if we don't have 7 thumbs, we don't have 7 thumbs. But the goal would be to hold a council workshop on undergrounding citywide facilities. So we took feasibility out. Do we have thumbs up on that? Bill's good? Okay, that's on the big board. Okay, we're going to keep moving here. We got about 45 minutes left, and we're going to head towards the goal line here. All right, community development. I had a discussion with Nita, right? Netta, okay, Netta. Most of these things that are on here are either operational, they're actually they're within the purview of the city manager, they're already being done. And so I'm going to have Netta come up and actually walk through the list of items. Some of them are code changes, not appropriate for a goal. I'm going to have her walk through the community development so you guys have a little bit of a flavor on where they are on some of these things.
Michael, do you actually mind not highlighting? It's a harder to read. Okay, thank you. Upzoning some R1 beyond SB 9 is something that is being discussed through the land use alternatives discussion with the community, and would come to council with kind of the land use alternative discussion for consideration of just not that, or not only that, but other ways land use changes could be made throughout the city. ADUs already are a ministerial approval process. I think this may be making standardized building permits. That was identified in the housing element as well, and will be done as laid out in the timelines there. I was unclear about the establish a one credit check program for rental applications. If council could provide some more information there. Some of these things that are related to building standards and such are being looked at by community development in that quarterly work plan task list that we provided. Some of these are already on there and will be addressed later on in the year by our staff to develop some of these things. I think that addresses most of that. The specific code design standards, that could be looked at with looking at objective design standards or modifying our existing codes.
Okay, so I wanted you to hear that because there's a lot going on in community development, and of course, as we talked about, there's other things that bleed over, housing and some of the other stuff that we talked about. But I wanted you to hear from the staff that most of those things are either ongoing, they're happening, or they really fall within the kind of the code and some things that are not appropriate for goals. Liz?
So I want to ask, is it appropriate to add in as goals some specific things, I think that were brought up by public speakers today, some of them? One is we passed a bike or a bicycle strategic plan in 2014 that still hasn't been completed. And I don't know if that goes to community development or public works, but I would like to see us pull that up and get it finished. That was 2014. I think we really need to include in this making changes to the short-term vacation rental ordinance. And we need to accomplish building electrification. It was started with the last council in at least workshops, and I think that it behooves us to do so. And then there was a comment about the pesticide plan that the state has and that counties are now implementing, and our city should get on board to meet the state's goals and accomplish the roadmap for safety for human health.
Okay, appreciate that. I want to focus your attention here on the community development. Is there an interest? You heard from staff, most of those things are there. Is there things other than that that you want to create a goal on community development? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. You know, I'm the one who put in bring standard plan checking back in-house. You know, I think we've tried it. I think it was a good idea to give it a try. I have spent so much of my time talking to people who have had problems with the outsourced plan checking. I really think we've got to bring that back in-house. I think doing it out of house is adding to costs and to time and delays and lack of faith in our government. We need to do that. The other thing is the one credit check program for rental applications. It's a little bit community development. I've talked with the city attorney about this. And this would be for tenants. For those of you who don't know, and I think Councilmember Campos has been through it, somebody who's looking for an apartment may be putting in applications at 30 different places, and for each one have to pay a $40 or $50 credit application fee. And they may not get any of those apartments. And what the city could do, and again, I've spoken with Mr. Hagelin about this, is require landlords to accept what is essentially like a verified, a notarized credit check, so that an applicant would get one credit check, and then the city, there would be some staff time from the city, but it could actually, some of it be handled online, so that a renter could go and provide the credit check, and the landlord could verify that that was in fact a real and recent credit check. And you know, when we talk about some of the things we can do for tenants and tenant protections, this one is really a pretty easy lift.
Okay. Need some staff input on that. The legality of that, can the city do that?
Yeah, we haven't had the opportunity to look into that legality of that. Councilmember Johnson did mention it to me, so that's something if the council wants us to devote some resources to, we can certainly look into that and explore what legal options there are for doing that.
All right, so that's going to be a report back to council. All right, I want to do our best to have you guys focus on goals that we don't develop 20 report backs here that are part of your goals. That's not going away, but I think you're going to need a standalone report back. That initiative may be something the council endeavors to do once you get the report from the city attorney. Anything else on the community development? I want to keep moving here unless there's something really, Joe.
Yeah, I want to, now that I can legally talk about STVRs, yeah, I got something back from the state that says I can now talk about STVRs. It took 2 appeals and took 2 years, but I finally got it. We have to solve or update STVR ordinance. We've been trying this for 3 years, and I think back to an earlier comment that Bill made about confidence with the city and the citizens. They lose confidence in us if we keep kicking the can down the road and don't get things accomplished. So I really think we need to get that done this year.
Okay, how do we put that in a form of a goal? How would you?
Update the STVR ordinance by 12/31.
Okay. Any staff concern there?
The city attorney and I have been talking about an approach. In fact, 2 of the folks who spoke on this topic tonight, or early this morning, sorry, I've spoken with personally about what that approach might look like. And Andy, do you want to kind of share the latest on that?
Sure. So the concept was that we would approach this kind of in a mediation format. We've talked to Dave Sipos, who's also working with us on some other litigation that we're involved with, and it would be an effort to bring the parties together, not just in a meeting where everyone would come and speak, but there would be some homework done beforehand where the mediator would actually conduct interviews with stakeholders to get their perspective on what's needed to be done and not, and then eventually there would be a meeting held, or a series of meetings held, where the mediator would work to try to develop some consensus on what an ordinance revision would look like, what changes needed to be made to enforcement, to caps, those types of issues. So that's in the works. I've had the conversation with the mediator already. If the council wishes us to move forward, we can get that ball rolling fairly quickly.
So would that be, would any of what you covered be inconsistent with what Joe's goal is, and that it would be to adopt basically a citywide ordinance on this issue?
My only caution, and I think this is kind of a small likelihood of this happening. When we do the mediation process, my hope is that folks on different sides of the table are able to come to an agreement, walk out of the room hand in hand with the framework of an ordinance that the city council could adopt. I think that's what we're looking for. But it's predicated on there actually being agreement in the room through the mediation process. So provided that is true, I don't see why we couldn't meet the time frame that the mayor just pointed out. But it would require the folks in the room, yes, coming to an agreement that we could then adopt.
So it's two things, because I got a little background on this. First, people have to agree to come to mediation. Secondly, you got to have a mediated agreement that everybody endorses, or you don't have a deal. So there's some unknowns there. It's just for council to be aware of. It's not simply, if you're going to pass an ordinance on X, you guys vote, it's an ordinance. This is not that thing. There's some outside influences that have a direct impact on if you have the ability to do this. Bill.
In complete respect for Joe in terms of the STVRs and Mike and Liz in terms of their concerns, I'm a hard no. I just want to put it out there on adding anything to community development. If you want to put that in the city manager's office and have them work on it, I think that's fine. We've got the general plan, we've got the housing element, we've got the local coastal plan. We just added homelessness report. You got half a staff. You don't, I mean, and I think Netta will stand up here and tell you, you know, they can do it, but we're not being fair to them to add something. So if I'm fine doing STVRs, but it's not out of the community development. They don't have the capacity.
All right. Two things. One, notwithstanding Bill's comments, I think I'm going to go back to what the city attorney and the city manager said, is that for council to adopt a goal, to adopt an ordinance that council does not have full control over, I'm not sure is going to serve your needs. And I guess you can measure it, but it's just something to keep in mind. You want to, as your best you can, you want your goals to be something that's, for lack of a better description, it's totally within the control of the city. Mike?
Thank you. And going to what Bill was saying as well, I don't think it serves anybody for us to restart the process. We've been talking about this not for 3 years. We've been talking about this for 7 years. It was 5 years ago when I was a resident and I was at the Wedgwood Banquet Center at a workshop that was, to bring everybody together to figure out how to work on STVRs. It does not look good that we keep making progress on STVRs, and then we start the process all over again. And I, as a council member, I am not willing to cede my authority to a group or a workshop to decide whether or not they support an ordinance. I think council can make that decision. We do have council meetings where we take public input. I have talked with Terry Foley. I have talked with Laura Kinney. There is a lot of common ground that can be done, and many of those discussions have already happened. And I want us to move forward with getting an STVR ordinance, but I don't want it to be stifled under rethinking things. We made a lot of progress last year, and because of unfortunate communication, the STVR ordinance update that was going to come to us in the summer and then maybe come to us in the fall, then the decision was made not to bring it back to us this year. But I think we should build on what we have. We absolutely will take public input, but I don't think it should be an unwieldy process. And I don't think that council needs the people who show up at a meeting at the Wedgwood Banquet Center to adopt it unanimously.
Let me have last question, City Attorney. Is the reason for the mediation to, in a sense, bring all the stakeholders together so you can find common ground, or is the reason for the mediation is because you have stakeholders that could prevent the ordinance from being implemented? They could stop it.
I think it's your first. I think Terry Foley and Laura Kinney, I've spoken with both of them. They obviously have their opinions, but there's 100 plus owners. They may all have different perspectives. We can't assume that everyone on the Pierpont Bay Community Council supports what Terry Foley is saying. I mean, there could be various opinions there. My understanding was that they did conduct a meeting years ago which failed because it wasn't facilitated correctly. So I think the goal of the mediation is to try to explore what the different concerns are and see if they could find some consensus that could then be brought back to the council for approval. It's certainly not meant to abdicate the council's responsibility or authority in this case. It's just simply to come up with a solution that could be presented to council and maybe built on from there.
All right. I think council has some varying views on this. So let me just, based on what the city attorney is saying, is it, we've heard from Bill, is it likely we're going to get 7 thumbs on this? Doesn't look like it. Okay.
Well, Liz had her hand up before I
Oh,
did.
I don't know. Okay, go ahead, Liz.
I think that we have to also consider, if we're not going to take seriously this ordinance, we need to put a hold on any new short-term vacation rental licenses, because we had 70 between January 1st last year and December 31st this year. It didn't double the number, but it was enough to create a lot more homelessness in our city. Those two issues are so tied together in Ventura that we need to decide some way to stop that.
So a couple things you guys have done. First, let me just congratulate you. You guys have done a very good job of dialogue today. Outstanding job. The idea that some of you may have a different approach to dealing with this doesn't necessarily communicate that you all are not looking at this as a challenge and an important issue for the city. You just may have different viewpoints on, how to approach doing that based on what you heard from the city attorney and the city manager. So, it's an important issue. If it doesn't make it on the board because of a variety of reasons, that doesn't mean you guys are not, it doesn't mean you're ignoring it or forgetting about it. It just needs to necessarily get a little more work done on it before council's ready to basically give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, I have no problem taking it out of community development. I have the same concerns and giving it to the city attorney's office. I think that's
fine by me.
And then as far as the mediation, Mike, I don't want to abdicate our responsibilities. It has to come to us. I've had experience with the mediator that Andy wants to use, and we've made so much progress on water, which I don't know if God could make more progress than what this guy does. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I think we have to try another way. It seems like every time I talk to both of the individuals or people on both sides, they don't seem like they're that far apart, but for 7 years, we haven't gotten anywhere. So we can't keep trying the same thing and expect a different result. So I'd like to shove it over into out of community development into the city attorney. And then if the city attorney wants to go down the path of mediation, then let's do that and get it done.
All right, sounds like we found an off-ramp here. So can you restate the goal? Go ahead, Akbar.
To both Bill and the mayor's point, the way that this was structured, mediation was developed as an idea for a couple of reasons. One, so we could have kind of a consensus building approach to this, and number two, to Bill's very point that we need to relieve community development. We can't add anything new to their plate, given everything that they're already tasked with. And so while the lion's share would be from the city attorney's office, of course, community development's going to have to play a role at some point. What I wanted to set the expectation for the council is that the Coastal Commission has a role to play in this after a new ordinance is adopted. So the council will do their piece. Let's say they adopt a new ordinance by December 31st. That would still need to go in front of the Coastal Commission and being incorporated into our local coastal plan. If that were incorporated, and that's the piece that would impact community development the most, is what comes next. However, as the council's aware, we're going to have to update the LCP as part of the general plan process. If this were one of those things that we're talking now 2024, that would reduce the workload because we're already processing other amendments to the LCP. And Netta, I think I got the story right, but I just want to make sure I'm not forgetting a piece. Is that mostly it? Okay. So again, I'm making that comment to set the expectation. The job isn't done when the council's done adopting the ordinance. It then needs to go to the Coastal Commission, which will be packaged together with other items.
Okay, very good. All right, so Joe, just to restate it, adopted ordinance, could you just lay it out for council so that we know what we're putting our thumb? Bill, I'm sorry.
No, to kind of go to Liz's point too, I don't have an issue if there's two STVR ordinances. So if there's one for the coastal zone and there's one for outside the coastal zone that are different. So, I mean, I think we can go, because regardless, I don't want to stop the implementation of a citywide STVR because now we got to go to the coastal zone and they're going to, you know, they don't care what happens on the east end. You know, they or the west side, deep, you know, outside of the coastal zone. I realize that. So I don't have an issue if there's two ordinances that, you know, because whereas one is going to take a longer path.
All right, that's a twist there. Mike?
Just an important clarification on this. Prior council direction to staff was not to have any separate policies, to really true them up everywhere we can. But I would think the point would be we could look at an STVR ordinance and the coastal zone, it may not take effect immediately, but it could in the rest of the city.
I don't mind truing them up together afterwards, but I just don't want to.
Well, it can be the same ordinance that does not apply in the coastal zone until coastal signs off, and then.
You okay with it? Okay. Let's get it on the table. What do we vote on? Or what are we consensusing on?
Update STVR ordinance by 12/31 of this year.
Okay. Everybody good on that?
In the city manager.
Thumbs up.
And the city manager's responsibilities.
City attorney.
One of those guys. You can fight for it.
You got a thumbs up? Okay, that goes on the big board. All right. We're going to move now. This is the final sprint home here, folks. So a lot of these things are carryover, or not carryovers. There's some bleed over. Turn to the first page, I believe. Maybe not the first, but yes, first page of your list. Organizational management, customer service, governmental services, community relations, affordable housing. Affordable housing is probably not part of that. Okay, so let's just start at the top. How many goals we got up here so far? 8 goals. Okay, so we want to make sure that we got a focused set of goals and we don't end up with 15 goals here that can't get accomplished. So I think we're doing okay. All right, organizational management. Employee stability succession plan, classification, and compensation study, that's all one. Increase city staffing to meet city service needs, more frequent employee recognition programs. Okay, is there anything on that in terms of organizational management that council does not want to see included in some kind of broader initiative for organizational management? Anything there that, well, let me just throw out the obvious. And maybe it's not obvious. You don't have the classification compensation study done, correct? Okay. That probably is going to have an impact on your ability to add city staff. So you need one before you do the other because you got to have your eyes wide open on that. So
Andy, just for clarification, the class and comp study is about a month out from seeing the results, at least the initial results. So it's almost there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So complete the classification, and is it too narrow? Because that's happening anyway. I don't want them to waste a goal on something that's basically a month out.
Correct, and I'm going to harken back to the memo I provided to council last Tuesday or 2 Tuesdays ago. It's more about what we do with the results. I think it's safe to say that the organization is eagerly awaiting what the council and management chooses to do with respect to compensation going forward. And as you pointed out, that kind of has a natural contradiction to the second bullet point there with increasing city staffing. So just given our resources, I just want to point that out.
How about more frequent employee recognition and event programs? That's really a separate issue. And that I don't know what that may look like, more, employee of the month, recognition to city council. What are your thoughts on that? You want to incorporate something like that as a council goal?
I'm sorry. I want to go back. I don't mean any disrespect to moving this forward, but we ignored Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Campos's discussion regarding the one rent or the one credit check. And I don't want to, they brought that up, and I think we have to have that conversation, finish that.
You have to look into the legalities.
Yeah.
I understand, but then So are you doing that, or is that?
A report.
He's going to report back.
Is that going to come out? We're going to get.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't.
Yeah,
get that.
that's fair enough.
Okay, okay.
No, I'm glad you brought it up.
I just wanna make sure that
Yeah,
They're still getting that.
You had me going for a second. Yeah, I said, well, yeah, I kind of thought we did it. Okay. Okay. All right. I appreciate that. Okay, so Joe.
I don't see any of these really being essential to be a goal for us. The increasing staff and that's a finance audit and budget. The classification study, we're a month away from doing that, and I don't know about the succession plan and employee stability. I don't know if the two are somebody thinks that those are absolutely tied together, or I just don't think that I don't see a goal in here.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I see a lot of nods. Okay, so go ahead, Jeanette.
I don't know who brought them, but I'd like to hear more from whoever brought them forward, if that's possible, or maybe what you got out of it, because while I can see maybe it's not a goal for council, I certainly see it as an internal goal for the management team.
You're reading my mind. I think a lot of these things are within the purview of the city manager with council concurrence. None of these things are being forgotten. It may not be on the board, but trust me, your city staff is paying attention to virtually everything that's on there. Go ahead, Jim.
So I wasn't the one who put these down, but I do want to say that, generally in companies and corporations, there is an employee incentive program that's well lined out, and this is what we do, and this is how we do it. And I don't know if we have something specifically. I know when we talked about when we were onboarding, we got some great information on what we do for employees, but I'm not really sure if there's actually a plan that's written and says this is what we do.
Want me to address that first, or should I wait?
Yeah, go ahead.
And not that would be our goal, it would be yours, but.
Jim, you're absolutely spot on. I think there's a recognition among the leadership team that, particularly as we come out of the pandemic, that there needs to be more opportunities for employee recognition. In fact, in my memo, I'm just looking at it on the screen here, item C under strategies to consider on the last page, it mentions a standard schedule for these various departmental recognition programs. We've historically kind of all did our own thing, and they were on different schedules. Public safety had a program to recognize the firefighter or police officer of the year, and same thing we did for civilian ranks. So Danielle Keys, our HR director, was, in fact, we just had a discussion at the executive team table, is can we align those on a calendar basis? So we're all kind of doing our departmental celebrations and then roll up a more unified approach to recognizing our employee and supervisor of the year, for example. That's just one example, and there's probably about a dozen other things that we could be doing. That's a piece of it. Recognition is a piece of it. And of course, as I've mentioned before, the compensation is probably another piece.
All right, a lot of you are nodding, and I just want to remind the council, it would be an incorrect assumption to say if it doesn't end up on your broad master goals, that it's going to be simply forgotten and brought up to the table. That's not the case. And I can tell you most of these things are going to be done internally with the city manager, and you guys are going to be getting invites somewhere later in the year about come to this employee recognition program. So, okay, let's move. So organizational management, we're going to put that in the parking lot. Customer service, anything on customer service that council sees as worthy of one of your broad goals? You have concrete basic services, just do what's legally required, more community engagement, city willingness to accept change, #1 in customer service in the state. That could be something. I'm just throwing some. That could be a goal. Not sure how you'd measure that.
Yeah, that was Doug.
Translation of council agendas and call text one city number for potholes. Some of these are tasks. Some of these are not necessarily goals. And so I just want to get your feedback. Anything there that council feels strongly about as making a goal?
Yeah, what's not there, and which I know several of us have had conversations about, is being more service-oriented, setting service standards in the customer-facing departments. So what I was looking for here is some type of a goal that would set service standards throughout the city.
How would you measure that? I think you're onto something, but how would you measure that?
How would I measure? I would measure it by every department needs to have service goals and metrics. So some departments may not directly interact with, quote, their customer isn't external, but I think in the city, everybody either works with the citizens or supports somebody who works for the citizens. So if you're in that secondary class, then your service metric should be, I'm going to provide the following service to my fellow employee who's going to service a citizen when they come to the counter, when they come online or call on the phone.
Okay, Mike?
Thank you, and I want to thank Mr. Ali Khan for really putting a focus on customer service and bringing in somebody for at least 6 months so we can have one person answering the phone. I was the one that put in the thing about texting, because what we're then talking about is actually a more complicated issue. I've spoken with Mr. Cameron about this as well. I absolutely think people should be able to text as well as call. Our phone system doesn't naturally handle that, but that builds in some of that data collection that we can use for the metrics. You know, this idea of call text one city number to report policies and ask questions, that includes, you know, a sort of tracking like we have with Comcate, but it would be an updated system, and it would give us an idea also very specifically, you know, when the ticket gets closed, when something gets sent over to Public Works over a pothole, what was the time frame?
And if I can, we have a great example of this. It's our own water department.
Yes.
The water department call center uses contemporary software. You can see how many people are calling in, how long their wait is, what's the average time. And I'm kind of looking at, I don't want to design it. I should be at the policy level.
No,
So
that's good.
I want
Let
management.
me ask staff, is there any technical infrastructure issue that would prevent during the course of this year or 18 months from the city developing a single caller number that you can call or text for these, you know, basic city services, potholes, tree trim, you know, street repairs?
Yeah, so, and thank you for asking. Thank you to the council for giving me the opportunity to speak on this subject, because it's something that I think we as leadership have acknowledged we need to put more behind, or just kind of rearrange how we address customer service currently. There's nothing that would stop us in that time frame. It's probably more of the 18-month side, though, if not a little bit longer. And the reason for that is, the reason, and to follow on to the mayor's example, the reason why Ventura Water, and I got to give Gina credit and her predecessor as well, is they've resourced it very well. They have good leadership. They have a staff that is there to handle the phone call volume, and they have the technology in place to be able to do that. And so I think in my memo, the one that I referred to earlier, I mentioned bright spots. Ventura Water and the customer care group is a bright spot in our organization. For us to do this properly, to handle a lot of these other inquiries that come our way, it's going to require a lot of the same formula, a lot of the same pieces of that recipe, the human resource behind it, as Mike just talked about, the technology to support it, and Mr. Cameron and Heather are I'll say Mitchell and Heather are both working on that solution in terms of our new 311 system and what that looks like. If the direction from City Council is to improve customer service and make sure that we're being responsive to inquiries, what I'd like to do is come back to City Council with really kind of the low-hanging fruit on what it would take to make that happen, because these will have budget implications in the way of either human resources or investment in technology, and probably reshaping of how teams are formed and how we handle inquiries today. And a really, really basic example, we advertise, and Mike and I have spoken about this, probably 4 dozen different phone numbers across the city as hotlines. And to me, the definition of a hotline means when someone calls, that phone is picked up right away. Taking inventory of everything that we do today, because I think we just had this proliferation of mediums to contact the city with. I'd like to really, roll up our sleeves and kind of restructure this from the ground up. But that's going to take time, and if I have the council support to do so, I'd love to do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill.
2 points. This is another bright spot. I do think Mr. McDonald sitting over there. City clerk's office. But I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel on this necessarily, too. I think part of the first step, in terms of that time frame, is there's got to be other agencies that are doing this well. Can we start looking at, who's considered the leader in this within,
Right.
and start, what do you do?
Best practices.
Yeah, let's go there.
So the goal possibly, go ahead, Jeanette. Did you?
Yeah, I was going to say that, and I think starting off with our own, we hired someone, you hired someone to come in, kind of get, feedback from that, what's working, what's not. And I know that there are best practices out there, but, we have something already that we've started that I think we need to also pay attention to and kind of collect information from there as well.
So it sounds like it's not just the tech, sorry, thank you. Liz?
So, not to increase the cost of any of this plan? No, sorry. Not just to increase the cost of any of this plan, it's not my intent, but there is a huge population in our city that are not native English speakers. So starting from today, if you could include Spanish speaking, it would be very helpful.
Okay, good point. Mike?
Thank you. I would second that, but I really would like to see this implemented as a goal, not as something that comes back. The budget that we're going to be looking at is going to be based on these goals. And Mr. Alicon and I have spoken about some of the different software packages that enable this that the city is looking at. I think it's important that, as we look at the budget, we look at the spending, that we really identify this as an 18-month goal. And that would start with this budget. And so I would like to see this as a goal.
Okay. Bill?
To follow up on what Liz said, I completely agree with the Spanish. I'll third it. But also realizing that not everybody, like we're talking about texting and everything like that, not everybody has, seniors, not everybody's comfortable with that. Like if you gave my mom a phone and told her to text, it's just not going to happen. So we still need to just keep that in mind.
Yeah, the hard phone's never going away. Right, probably not. Okay, so the goal would be basically to establish a one-line call or text number to report potholes, trees, kind of a citywide for general city services, all right, within the next 18 months. Yes.
I would actually like to get rid of call or text and just say 21st century solution.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Sure. We know what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know what it means.
Yeah. All right. Any other question, dialogue, discussion? All right. Give me a thumbs up on that if you're good with that. Jim? Okay. It's going on the big board. Okay. Governmental services. These are, again, some of these.
Andy, so what did we do with customer service?
Yeah, thanks.
That's the one goal that we took out of customer service. The other ones are, I think within the context of the city manager, unless you guys had some that you wanted to call out.
Yeah, I think, I know you're working on this already, right? So, and I don't know if there is, what we talked about, there's other cities, I think Bill brought it up, that are doing this and they have some kind of they're successful. And is there a way that we can just connect with them and get that information? I think that's really what we'd like to, that I would like to see is who's doing it? What's the plan? What's it going to take to implement that?
I think if we just change 9 to 20 plan for city, 21st century customer service.
And we also need to put the bilingual in there too. Yeah.
But I don't think I want that 100% included, but a 21st century plan is bilingual.
Okay, fair enough. Just so it's noted. Yeah.
Yep. I was just going to address Jim's comment. Over the past couple of years, we have visited other city halls to see, how exactly they address customer service. there's a variety of different formulas, and they come in different packages depending on which organizational structure you visit. What may work in one city may not work in another one. But from our observation, I think a few things are always present in a high-functioning customer service group. You have good leadership, it's well-resourced, and you got technology that works well. Provided those things are true, we can make most things work. So we are taking cues from other cities that have done this well, and I expect that that'll inform what we bring before you as part of the budget process in terms of how this looks for your next budget year.
Was there anything else on customer service the council wanted to talk about as it relates to a goal? Some of these things are, like I said, willingness to accept change, recognize that, not really a goal. Go ahead.
I think, I just want to make a note that I think the employee incentive program or whatever will help tremendously as well in the customer service. I just want to make that note that that's important.
Bill?
And I don't believe these are in any order, but if
They're not.
going to be in one, I would want.
Yeah, it's not a priority, yeah. Okay. All right, let's move to governmental services. Again, some of these they're more thoughts rather than an actual goal, but is there anything on this list here that council wants to actually incorporate as one of your goals? Mike?
I would just like to point out that I submitted 5 of them. There's 6. I submitted 5 of them. They're not thoughts. They're actually action items. I do think we need to appoint a 7-member citizen committee based on everything we've been through in the last year to look at everything from protocols, policies and procedures, ordinances, and even charter amendments. Other charter amendments that I really think we need to do, this would be an 18-month thing. Council compensation. I think $600 a month is an issue. And that's something where, you know, we could do a charter amendment to increase council compensation to something like, I don't know, like $2,000 a month plus benefits. But we need to do that to make it easier for other people, make it easier for people to serve on council and to run for council. And it doesn't have to take effect immediately. We can pass something like that and say, it does not take effect for 12 years. But do that just for the future. Some of the issues we've seen as well, I would like to see the clerk and treasurer be positions that report directly to city council. Not elected positions, but instead of council overseeing 2 employees, the city manager and the city attorney, to add to that a treasurer that would be independent and the clerk. I put in standardized training and onboarding for citizen committees and commissions. This continues to be a problem. We've been talking about this for 2 years. It still hasn't happened. We have planning commissioners that have never really been onboarded. We've had appeals come to us because a commission doesn't know how to craft findings. And then last, I really think we should create a seat for a resident that's under the age of 26, and that's an arbitrary number on those 3 committees. So I would just push back and say that those are more than thoughts. Those are action items.
Yeah, and let me apologize. I didn't mean to imply that none of them were goals. There's some of them. So any comments, thoughts, discussion on the items Mike brought up as it relates to, because some of them could be, for example, appoint a 7-member committee could absolutely be a council goal. Anything of interest to the council there that they may want to consider putting up on the board? Joe?
Well, I'm not sure it's on the board, but I think we have battered around charter amendments, and I think we do need to have some kind of study or analysis about updating our charter. I think the last time, I don't even know when the last time it was updated.
2016.
Pardon me?
2016.
Yeah. So it's time. I agree with Mike on the compensation. Probably not 12 years, maybe a little sooner, but yeah,
something.
So, but I don't know if it's a goal or not, but we do have to assign, I think, a task for us to take a look at charter amendment.
It absolutely could be a goal. We can work through that. Go ahead,
I
Jeanette.
wanted to ask Andy if he can chime in on that process, the charter amendment,
Yeah.
because I know that there's certain times when you can and cannot do it.
I believe, and Michael can correct me, I believe it would have to come before the election, before the voters in November of next year during a general election. So we have a little bit of lead time on this, but we
Which
do have
you'll
time
need.
to. Yeah, we have some time to put some things together.
There's a fair amount of, not to get sidetracked, I've done a fair amount of work. That timeframe actually works very nicely for the council if you have an interest in doing that, because normally these charter changes, they involve a lot of community outreach, a lot of community education, workshops. There's a lot of moving parts there. To Joe's point, it wouldn't just be to address one particular issue. You may want to look at a whole variety of things. And so the timing, actually, the city attorney pointed out, works nicely. And it would be something that council would want to endeavor if you want to start the process. Now would be the time to actually say, okay, start the process, begin to investigate, review, evaluate potential changes of the charter. Because that would involve, I guess, Mr. City Manager, a variety of city departments, your clerk, your city attorney, city manager's office, just to start with, correct?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jeanette.
And sorry, I wanted to continue on some of the other items. I sat on the appointments committee, and while I know you said the age of 26 is an arbitrary number, I'm hesitant in putting any number because we've had such a hard time just recruiting in general. And I know Michael has done an excellent job at going out and speaking to different community groups, but maybe, I don't know if you've tried community colleges, talking to them or advertising with them. Maybe that's how we can pull in some of the younger generation or high schools, I'm not sure. But I would be hesitant on putting just a number just because we've had a hard time recruiting to begin with.
Okay, Liz?
Yeah, I would like to suggest that we add a layer of recruitment. Community colleges might work, although they're not all residents of Ventura. But there's several groups of young people in the city of Ventura that we never do any outreach with. And so maybe Michael hasn't had the opportunity to learn about some of them or meet them. So if we could all input that.
I don't want to lose the charter discussion.
Well, I want to finish this one.
Fair enough.
Just, when you have that set aside, then young people will not be discouraged. They'll realize there is a seat for somebody that is their age, which is very different from, whether they're going to get invested in applying for a committee or commission when they know that when they walk in that room, we're going to look at them as a kid. And so, and certainly the Parks and Rec, we have some committees and commissions where it's difficult recruiting, but I think actually saving a seat for somebody under a particular age would help.
Is that legal?
I think it probably is. We have lots of different, in our ordinance, lots of different specific seats that we look for. We'd have to confirm that, given an age restriction, but I think we do have some qualifications that we look for in certain appointments.
Do you guys appoint to these commissions? Does council do, like council interviews? Well, that's one way to get at it, just have that consideration. But if I hear you, Mike, you don't even get the applications. If I'm hearing you correctly, you're not even getting the applications of the younger people because they don't think it's really they're going to be considered?
And I would suggest that if you want to reach out to the for example, the community college, saying that there is a seat that is reserved for somebody of a particular age, that somebody could look at that and say, I really could do this.
Got it. Bill?
I really want to go back to charter reform, but I've had this conversation with Mr. McDonald. He's got a lot of ideas on it, because I tried to flush it out as part of when I was running for council. So if we're going to do something, I think Michael is more than capable of making some recommendations and coming back to us at a later date.
Fair enough. Okay. On the charter.
Yeah, because I think that's the bigger issue. And my question is, so when would we have to be on the ballot in November of '24
June.
When would it have to be adopted by council, or I'm assuming council adopts it to go on the ballot? When would that have to occur?
So I'll have to confirm the exact date, but Councilmember Johnson's correct that it's sometime in June that council would have to take that final action of whether or not to approve the initiative for the ballot.
From June then-ish. Are we talking about appointing a citizens committee?
Would be however you guys want to do it. There's a lot of, you can Google a whole bunch of ways that cities go through charter.
We're talking about a hard date, right? Whatever it is, there is a hard date.
That's right, and that's June of 24 to be clear, because the
24.
next,
I get
yeah.
that, but it's,
Yeah.
you're going to recruit, appoint a committee, I mean,
You have time to do it if the council has an interest in doing
it's
it.
going to be, like, you have 12 months, assuming we had a committee up and running in June to get this done.
Right. It's up to council,
Let's say it's not possible. I'm just saying.
Are we going to be limited to this list that we write here?
Excuse me?
Are we going to be limited to the list here?
Of course not.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so on the charter amendment, I don't want to say reform, charter amendment. So the goal would be to initiate the process to evaluate potential changes in the city charter. Very broad. What does that look like? That would be a report back from your city clerk for council to look at. And then, like I said, I can tell you, because I've looked at this, there's a whole menu of options that council can look at, some of which you may do, some of which you don't do. It's not required. For example, I think you have citizens committee. A lot of them do that, so, but that would be the general goal. How do we feel on that? You good?
It's really undefined. I mean,
Well, you're gonna initiate the process right now, this year, okay, to evaluate the potential changes to the city charter.
So I just think we have to have that done by June of this year.
Well, it's, you're adopting goals for this year, and that's June's within this year.
Well, again, this one has a really short fuse.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify.
Okay, go ahead.
It sounds like this discussion, there's a desire to go on the 24 ballot. There's another one 2 years later. I don't know if that's where you're getting at.
Well, that would be part of your evaluation.
But if we're going to do it in June of 24, there's a difference between go spend the next literally 90 days and come back with something, or come back in 180 days with something.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
And that would be part of your report. The city clerk said the next time that the soonest you could do it would be November 2024. It doesn't mean you have to do it by then.
I get that, but
Yeah.
we would have to put it in place within 90 days.
No.
If we're going to form a committee and we're going to have meetings and we're going to
So-
have a process, I mean.
Right. That's if you wanted to meet the target of November 2024.
So-
Staff's gonna bring you back a report that says, here's the things you need to do by this date. If you want to move it out, then obviously that gives you a longer runway.
If
You
I
follow?
may?
Yeah.
We did go through this not too long ago with the Charter Review Committee. They didn't take an entire year of meetings. I would see the timeline on this being setting up that committee that would work, September, October, November, December, and then council can be dealing with it in June,
But
February.
again, no, that's,
Yeah.
it's a pretty short, I mean, it's going to be summer before we know it.
Okay. Any further discussion on the wording would be develop an initiative, start the process to evaluate proposed changes to the city charter. Develop a process to evaluate the proposed changes to the city charter. No date certain, except the process will be back, obviously, well before December, to Bill's point, if you're going to have any kind of notion to get this done in November 2024. Do we have clarity? A lot of discussion on that. So, okay. Let me show me thumb. Bill's better on that one. Okay, good. All right, that goes on the big board. I don't want to leave Mike's point here, but is there interest in appointing a 7-member committee? Okay, I'm seeing no, there's nothing personal. Okay, what about, we had discussion on this, create a resident seat for somebody under the age of 26 for the Park and Rec Commission.
I'd like to task Michael.
Let's have some more discussion on that. We heard from the city attorney, it's legal, probably. Okay? That would kill the idea pretty quickly if it wasn't. Yeah.
May I simply ask that the Appointments Recommendation Committee meeting talk about it, and if they decide it's worth pursuing, bring it back to council? So it's not a council goal?
That'd be a quick way to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so that takes care of that. Yeah. Anything else under governmental services? We're getting ready to land the plane here, guys. Okay. All right, community relations. Community unity, council staff, business, civic faith, okay. Not sure that's a goal. That's something that's an end state we all strive for. City culturally united. Again, these are all great things. I don't know how you would measure that. I don't know how you put a timestamp on that. Any other thoughts on community relations?
I have a thought that, that's always bothered me about the city of Ventura. It's under this category, and it would be a budget item, would be that we charge for our concerts in the park over the summer. We do it I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. But I don't understand why we don't, in terms of cultural unity, we have these gorgeous parks. I mean, it was one of the advantages, the silver linings of COVID, for which I will never understand why we understood that there's this incredible outside that we all have here living in Ventura, is why can't we move this concerts in the park and move them from, we could either start on the west side or the east side. I'm more familiar with the east side, so we start at Hutzinger, then we go to Community Park, then we go to Arroyo Verde, El Camino, there's Kellogg, there's West, that would create cultural unity and get people outside of their homes, get them in here, have the general plan committee out there, have the fire department out there with their, have the, interacting with, people. I would love to see an event like that, that allows for that cultural unity that we're all looking for.
How would we make that into a goal?
Cultural unity event, let's, come up with.
Increase cultural unity events?
Yeah, that's just, a spitball, but that's the one that I would like to see,
Okay, any other thoughts on that? That's measurable, because right now, how many do you have? I heard none. Okay, so that would be 100% improvement if you got one in, okay? Okay, so the goal would be increase cultural unity events. Any comments from staff? It seems general, but that's only me. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I think if we can flush out some ideas and come back to
Okay,
Councilman
it's a goal,
McReynolds.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So increase cultural unity events. We need thumbs. That's a thumb? Okay. Jim? Okay.
Andy,
Those on
can I
the big
make
board. Yeah.
just a housekeeping comment? We have to be out of the room vacated by 2 p.m., so if I can suggest 20 more minutes, and then
We're
we have
done.
to start.
We got one more item here.
May I?
Yes.
In regards to community relations, and I think this ties in with customer service, I think it just ties in with communications. The website, one of the, Heather does a great job communicating, but one of the challenges that I've heard people share with me is the website. And I think maybe, like you said, we have, I don't know how many hotline numbers. Maybe when we go to the website, there's a way you go to the front page and the main page, the home page, and then there is a place where it is very easy to get to the things that are most commonly asked. I don't know how many clicks it takes to figure out what district you live in, but probably more than one. And so I'm just thinking maybe looking at the website and revamping that a little bit so it's more user-friendly.
Yeah, we are going through a website redesign currently. And Heather, how many months are we from the new one? 2 more months, so it's being worked on.
Then let me check that one off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, you have one more category here, and then I want to come back and summarize and have you guys endorse the whole thing.
That's exciting.
This is affordable housing, okay? This is the last thing here. So one of the bullet points is just the state of affordable housing. Second, support housing for those who suffer from mental health issues, substance abuse, down on their luck, or simply couldn't afford last month's rent. And then the third one is continue to encourage policy process and fee structure building of affordable units, whether it's ADUs, multi-unit housing, et cetera, et cetera. So, Liz.
I would like to put as a goal with this, solving the inclusionary housing problem, or making it a clear inclusionary housing ordinance and tenant protections.
Okay, so some language involving, do you have an inclusionary housing ordinance? Do you want to change it? Do you want to add it?
We have one.
You have one.
We have one coming to us.
We have a new one
You have a new one.
coming forward. We haven't seen it.
It's not adopted.
We haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it yet. Well, then it's probably not adopted. Okay.
But
So,
I think inclusionary housing and rental protection are two different things, though.
Oh, yeah.
So,
She's adding to it. All right, so, how do you want to proceed on this? I can tell you from, do you guys require, or by council policy, when somebody comes in for like, for example, a mixed-use project or even a standalone, that a percentage of those units are affordable?
Yeah, Ned, why don't you come on up? But I do want to mention the inclusionary housing ordinance is coming to council February 27th. So we're right on the doorstep of having an ordinance in front of the city council that the planning commission has already seen. And then I'll let Ned handle the rest.
Okay. You're the star.
I was just going to say the same thing. So we do have an inclusionary housing program in place now. The revised inclusionary housing ordinance was unanimously recommended for adoption by Planning Commission. That's coming to City Council February 27th for your consideration on that topic.
Okay, does that satisfy you? It's coming.
I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
Okay.
That's why I mentioned it.
All right.
All right, so, and this is something that was put under parking and transportation that we blew past and didn't discuss, but it's about affordable housing. And that is that the city should look at partnering with something like a community land trust. We've got these parking lots in Midtown that are underutilized. I think we could all agree on that. And the city should be exploring what is called a ground lease. And this is essentially leasing that land for a very low cost to a nonprofit on a term of 99 years. And what this does is it allows an affordable housing provider to come in, build affordable housing. They skip past the need to buy the property, and then based on the terms of the lease, they're able to immediately offer affordable housing. This is a way to take an asset we have and turn it into housing. It's a shortcut for getting affordable housing built. And we need to explore that. I'm not saying that we need to make that be the goal, but I think within 18 months, we should have a plan for looking at some of our city properties and what a ground lease program would look like. There are many other cities that are doing this as well. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Any thoughts from Mike's?
Yeah, I think I'm going to combine the two, Mike. So I think when we get inclusionary housing in February, then I think one of our first rounds of feedback to them is, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. But we need to have something in that plan that talks about, is there a way for us to leverage real estate that the city owns and partner up with nonprofits to quicken the pace of building affordable housing?
And if I may, what's coming to us is the inclusionary housing ordinance, which is saying X% of this type of development needs to fit these income restrictions, and it's not an actual affordable housing plan.
Bill?
Mike just said. I don't want to do anything that delays the inclusionary housing ordinance. We don't have inclusionary housing. We are not building affordable housing right now. So we need to not muck up that process right now. I like Councilmember Johnson's, I keep going back and forth with Mike and Councilman, sorry. But I am hesitant to add anything to community development's list right now in terms of beyond what they have, getting us a general plan, getting the local coastal plan, getting the housing element approved. In 12 months, I am completely, if they're done, I will have that conversation. I just am hesitant to add more.
Do you guys do goal setting every year or every other year?
Every year.
Every year?
And I just want to say, I appreciate that you've thought about it. And so for me, that's the important thing, that I had 3 minutes to make the pitch. Yeah.
That's the beauty of dialogue, right?
We have to have that conversation.
I love it.
But we've got to get the other stuff off of the plate. So
Okay, so on that note, anything specific on affordable housing that you want to discuss putting on the big board? You have some good ideas, none of them are going away. Mike, appreciate that.
I mean, I want to bring back redevelopment agency, so that's a whole
Yeah.
different,
Talk to Governor Newsom about that.
Yes, I talked to the state.
Okay, anything for the good of the order? Go ahead.
I want to just let the people know here, we've heard about electrification, and I don't think, and I'm hoping that the electrification.
Oh.
But I feel like we talked about it in economic development, it's still something that we need to discuss. It's a much larger, again, I keep saying 21st century, electrification is part of being a 21st century city. I hope that having it as part of the economic development plan is some additional steps forward in that. But I just want to say that we're not ignoring that.
Okay. Jeanette and then Liz.
And I'm sorry if I'm taking us off course really quickly, but I did want to mention, I know that we didn't put anything related to organizational management up there, but the increase in city staffing has to be up there, because we're going to be talking about budget allocations, and if we don't even have that on as part of our goals, then we may be shooting ourselves in the foot, because we have to plan for that if we want all those goals accomplished.
Yeah, I think the discussion is not that it's not going to be there, was the sequencing of the classic compensation study. To council have that information, because that will be very instructive on adding city staff, because the one has to happen before the other.
Yeah, and I get that, but I just want to make that point, because it could seem that we didn't put anything, and I know you said it, you prefaced it with, just because it's not up there doesn't mean we're not conscious of it, but I think that's really something that we can't forget, and that we should at least, say something verbally and commit to. And then the other thing in regards to more frequent employee recognition, I don't know if at the state of the city employees get recognized, but that could be an area where we could recognize some of our employees, as well as maybe have a mayor, recognition, something, so just wanted to put it out there.
Your city manager's furiously writing notes right there, so, but, okay, and like I said, we did kind of go through the governmental organizational management. I'm confident, while it may not have a goal up there, he's been writing ferociously, and I think you're going to see a number of initiatives in that area. Okay, Liz.
If we have a goal that says we're dealing with affordable housing, we need that goal to include defining what affordable housing means, because it's very ambiguous in a city as expensive as ours. An inclusionary housing ordinance.
There's a legal definition of affordable housing.
Well,
I think
inclusionary housing ordinance needs to define what's affordable and what's included.
is the inclusionary housing ordinance going to incorporate some of that, some of those concerns?
As you mentioned, affordable housing is defined in parameters of income and certain thresholds, so that is defined in the ordinance.
That's, if I'm not mistaken, it's not necessarily the city. There's some, yeah, we'll just briefly go over that.
Yeah, and I think what Ned was referring to is the AMI and the percentages of that set those different restricted income boundaries.
Okay. We are coming close to 2. Let me just congratulate you guys. You guys went through you may think like if we can put the ones that made it to the big board, we did our level best to actually work through that entire list. It was 60, 70 items, if I'm not mistaken. It was a lot. So, what I want to do is I want to go back and revisit. You have 11 items here that there was total consensus. All 7 of you put your thumb in the air. Some of the things did not make it on the board, and that is by design. That is by design. Not necessarily a bad thing, but you work together as a group, no voting, no losers. These are things that the city staff can basically say categorically have been supported by the council. Many of them are going to be ongoing goals. So, next year when we're here, we'll probably be talking about some of these same things. But is there anything on there as you review, because I'm going to ask you for a thumbs up on the whole package here, okay? Anything there you want to review, edit, remove, any thoughts or comments? Joe, you had your hand in the air.
Yeah, I know it's late in the day, I know we're quick and all that. I think we need to send a message. So last night, I was going over the engagement survey. We have issues with engagement and with employment stability, and I know some of us tied into compensation, and I wish I was so clever at 126 that I could come up with this goal that would just be ideal for all of us, to send the message back to the employees that, we hear you and you're vital and essential to us accomplishing any of these. And so I'm looking at my fellow city council members for them to be sharper than me at 1:30. Is there a goal that we can consider about our employees?
As general as investing in our workforce?
But let me offer, and I don't know about a goal, but I think the sense is there, and I think the city manager has mentioned possibly bringing back, for lack of a description, a report to the council on several initiatives that the city managers are looking at to enhance staff and employee recognition. And then council can look at those things. You'll see them in writing. I'm sensing there'll be a number of things there, and then you can endorse it as a city council. Does that get you where you need to go? It's specific, it's measurable, and it's totally on Akbar's plate. Do we have thumbs up on that? Yeah, Liz.
Well, could I just say, responding to Joe, that if Akbar brings the information to us, we could make a goal to respond and give recognition to employees that he recommends. We can make that one of our goals, to remember to do it.
You can always add it. Yeah.
I appreciate the council's emphasis on employee recognition. That we have some room to grow there. I guess what in my memo to the council, it was yes, recognition, but part and parcel to that, people are just having a hard time paying bills. I'll put it just plain and simple. If you were to talk to our workforce, many of who struggle to make ends meet, living in the city that they serve every day, it's incredibly frustrating. And as part of developing its goals, I think if I heard the mayor correctly, inherently there's a message that is sent to the organization around, for us as a city council, these are the 11 things that are important to us. And Joe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you were saying is you'd like to convey to the workforce that competitive pay, and if you want to use a different phrase, that's completely fine, is also important to you, or maybe you and your colleagues, without showing the council's hand on, here are the percentages that we're going to be looking for in terms of negotiations. That's not necessarily what I think you were getting at. I think it's more about conveying a sense of, we want to try and get closer to what their counterparts throughout the county may be earning, to help them have a more appropriate pay going forward. So again, not to paraphrase our mayor, but I think that's kind of where the genesis of the comment came from.
Jim?
So if I understand correctly, you're already working on a plan, aren't you, to kind of give us that information? But I'm in agreement with Joe. I think the message needs to get out that we do value And we want you to work on that plan and figure that out so it could be presented, we could move forward on something like that.
Yeah, so. Right.
That's a fact.
But- So
That's a
can, I
fact.
mean, can we put back, or can we put up there, because it has to do with the classification compensation study, so can we put that up there to know, to,
Sure.
hey, we're paying attention to this, and when it comes back, because we can't really, we don't have it finished, right? So, but if it's up there, I think
100%.
for us, that's
So
important,
complete the class and compensation study.
yeah.
Okay.
And do something about it.
That's it. All right, let's get that on the board. There, okay, you're well ahead of me on that, okay. Akbar, you look like you'd want to say something.
Well, the class and comp study is going to be completed in a few short weeks here. So, I mean, in terms of my workload, that's great. I'll have it checked off pretty quickly.
So respond to classification?
I think maybe that's a better way of phrasing it, or is it creating a, I'm choosing the right words on the fly here, folks. I apologize. This is a purely suggestion to the council. Is it using the results to create a pathway forward towards competitive pay? Is that what I'm hearing from the council, or am I?
So commit to competitive pay relative to peers on a citywide basis? Is that too far?
Relative to class and comp study.
Right. Go ahead, Bill.
I think our biggest fear is when we see that study is we're not going to be able to pay for it. So we're going to need to plan, like you're saying, to get to there. So maybe we've got to start working on that plan.
And Bill, thank you for pointing that out. I think in my conversations with each of you privately, we're probably not going to be able to get somewhere overnight. And I think I wrote that in my memo. I think what the organization might be looking for is, can we get somewhere over a number of years? If the council can take the right steps to show that they're actively working towards something, that's what I think our employees want to see. They understand we're not going to have the means to do everything we want to do July 1. But I think that they'll stay along for the ride, they'll be patient, they'll show up to work and do great work every day if they know that we're at least working towards something.
Can we say act in response to the classification and comp study? Or, I don't know, because I get what, yeah, we're going to have a class and comp study, but what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do with it?
An implementation plan.
Yeah, and
Implementation plan?
thank you, Mike. I was going to suggest something along those lines. Perhaps use the class and comp study to create an action plan to address needs.
There you go. I like it. Create an action plan to address employee stability and retention. How's that?
Satisfaction and
Okay. Do we get that? Address employee stability and retention. Okay, good. All right. How about a thumbs up on that? Okay, very good. Thank you for that, Joe. Okay. This is our last review here. This is what council came up with over the course of the last several hours. All of these were established through the consensus process. Anything on there that you want to change, edit, before we hit print? Okay, let's give me a thumbs up on the 2023 council goals. Okay. Well done. Give yourself a round of applause. You did a very nice job. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the mayor for his final comments and adjournment.
Meeting adjourned.
Oh, wait, I want to make a comment before you do that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It takes
Call
a
the meeting
motion.
back to order.
It takes a
Councilmember
motion
Johnson.
to adjourn. This is my third goal-setting meeting. You may recall, some of you, that the last two times we went through goal setting, we went through it all, and I ended up voting no on the goals that we came through in the process. I want to thank Mr. Ali Khan. I want to thank Mr. Hagelin, Mr. McDonald. I want to thank the mayor, and I want to thank Andy Fox for what a fantastic goal-setting process this was.
Anybody else have compliments for the mayor? Because now's the time to say it.
No.
Yes, Liz.
Councilmember Johnson, I'm complimenting the mayor.
Okay. So we're about there. Are we okay?
We're good.
Meeting adjourned.
All right. Well done, guys.